All right, folks, it's time for another edition of Mullings and Music and Memories. You know, we always have amazing conversations here on the platform, talking to all kinds of amazing guests and amazing people on general. And we've had some great ones over the last several months and all of that. Glad that the international broadcast media has provided me with this great platform and everything in order to have some great conversations. As a matter of fact, just earlier today on the radio show with Mark Lee, another show that airs right here on this platform, had the privilege of talking to Miss Cassandra Mayo, who has written a book about retiring at 52 and definitely has gone on in that way. And she was even talking about how she found her significant other at a late age. So she actually just recently got married and all of that. So even in her 50s, she's retired and also recently gotten married, and definitely a number of other life changes in all of that regard. So always great having some amazing conversations, learning about amazing people that are doing amazing things in our world and all of that. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation with a good friend of mine that has done some things in terms of the divine connection. We've actually worked on a event together that we just finished closing out, that being the Black Business Olympics and all of that. And then I've also got Brent Satterfield on, and he's going to talk about a lot of things that he's involved in as well. So always some great conversations that are happening here in our area. And of course, this is a global network, so we're always glad to have amazing conversations going on. So I'm going to bring Dolores on first, so we can talk just a little bit about what she's got going on with Divine Connections, and then I'm going to bring Brent in as well. But I'll start off really quickly with Dolores and all that she's got going on with the Divine Connection. How are you doing, Dolores? How's everything
Doing
going
great,
in your world? I know that
doing
we just
great,
finished
Mark.
doing that great event and everything. So I know that it was an amazing event with our business activity that we did with Mr. Kelly and everything in terms of
Absolutely.
the Black Business Olympics. But I know that your magazine is also doing great things, and I was really impressed with all that you're doing. So if you'll share with the world a little bit about what you've got going on and how they can get involved. And then, like I said, I'll bring Brent up as well shortly because we just love having a rolling dialogue about all kinds of things. So how are you doing in general? I know you've been busy, but how are you just doing
Mhm.
in general?
In general, I've been doing good, staying busy, trying to keep everything organized and keep everything flowing. Thank you so much for the opportunity as well. Definitely enjoyed you with the Black Business Expo. You're a big, major part behind the scenes, making it happen, and that's what it's all about.
Yes, it was definitely enjoyable working with a number of y'all, and you've done some great things in that regards. I know that one of our guests is going to talk a little bit about what he's got going on in his world and everything. But I know that faith is very important to you, and that's
Yeah.
one of the things that even here we talk about as well. So if you would share a little bit about the importance of faith to you and the importance of spirituality to you as well, because I know that even our founders here on this network, Kim Calhoun and Nick Palveda, even talk about their faith as well. So they are oftentimes open to that conversation. So I'd love to hear you talk about the importance of faith and spirituality in your own life.
Absolutely. Faith, of course, is my core. Believing in God and just He is my help with everything that I do, whether it's family, whether it's business, whether it's been school. So the journey of life, I've had, of course, faith. Faith that I graduated with no debt. Faith to have my first house built at the age of 27. Faith to start a business not knowing where it was going to go. And I've been in my business for 10 years now, networking with a lot of individuals. It's called Divine Connections Magazine. It comes out quarterly. We promote with different businesses, entrepreneurs, pastors, authors. So I'm definitely faith based in everything that I do. The magazine again comes out quarterly, and we do special different things with Divine Connections as well. Like right now, I'm doing a special for mothers. Mother's Day is going to come in May, and so what I was doing was bringing people together for sponsors, just if they have a Mother's Day gift, if their business has a Mother's Day gift, to sign on as a sponsor just for $25. Divine Connection will help you market your business as well as you can send a gift to a mother just for $25. And then on the other side, we want to somebody that says, hey, just like me, my mom is the bomb. She's been the nurturer. She's been the faith base. We've done everything through the Christ, through the help of the Lord to get where we are. Of course, there are challenges in family and life, but this the faith base, and we know our mothers play a significant part. So with that, I just want to honor them. And if a person has a mother that's the best mom ever, and they are their divine connections, I'm doing a small packet for $50 for the family as well. So there's great things going on with divine connections. Definitely got to stay rooted and grounded in the faith. And then, of course, also I have a book called "You Can Do It, Make It Happen, and Handle Your Business." And in this book, I talk about how I accomplished things through my journey with the help of the Lord. Of course, with faith based, again, graduating and all of that, no debt. Most people have got debt when they in school, but I decided to go a different direction. But I had to have determination and faith in God that I could do it and get through it and make it happen, get in and get out without having a burden on me and my family. So we did that. And so I'm just definitely grateful. On Wednesdays, I do divine connection interviews. Well, because there's so much positive things going on in the community. Definitely deal with a lot of gospel groups, moms, praise bands, pastors, faith-based organizations that spreads the word in their avenue. But it still says the same thing, that God is the first and foremost, and then we have to have Him in everything that we do.
No doubt about that. And I did want to bring in Mr. Satterfield in as well. He's actually done a lot of work in that regards and everything. He's actually done some research around even heaven and all of that. So definitely when I learned about what he's got going on, because he's actually got a publication called "We Were Never Meant to Do It Alone." So I'd love the
I
doctor
like that.
to share a little bit about what he's learned as well, because definitely, and he's also got the second book, "Bringing Heaven Home," and this sounds to be like a number of stories about multiple encounters with heaven. And I know a lot of times folks are like saying that they have never seen heaven or seen people return back from heaven, so they sometimes have wonders about even if heaven exists and things of that nature. So Mr. Satterfield, glad that you were able to join us. And you actually come from the world of science. And sometimes people think that those worlds are almost divisionary and everything, but you're a DNA scientist, but you also are very much involved in the heaven aspect. So I'd love to hear you share a little bit about that journey.
Thank you. Yeah, so my background is a DNA scientist, and some of the inventions that I've worked on, developed, they've been used around the world by millions of people, including in the present COVID pandemic. And so it's been exciting to have been on the ground floor of that, and at the same time to be able to share some experiences about heaven. Like you said, a lot of times people don't see those two worlds coinciding. As a scientist, I get a chance to talk to lots of other scientists and hear their views on faith, on God, on belief. And it surprises me that there are a remarkable number of scientists who do have a belief in something more. A lot of times that belief isn't very evolved, but there is a belief in something. And so that's it was more than what I would have anticipated or expected. And as you mentioned, I do have a book, Bringing Heaven Home. And in that book, I talk about a series of experiences that I had with the other side. So kind of like near-death experiences where you find yourself on the other side in heaven having conversations with God. And so I'm happy to be on the show today, happy to share anything that's relevant for you and for your listeners and to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I would love to hear about is even this concept of the near-death experiences and things of that nature. And Dolores may have some questions for you as well, because I know she's got a magazine that is actually very much involved in that whole spirituality space and all of that. But one of the questions I would ask is, how did you, could you explain some of these experiences that you went through? Because I know sometimes folks will talk about the going through experiences, seeing the light, seeing a number of other things, and then other folks are always giving kind of the naysayer point of view, which is that they've never seen anybody actually physically come over from the other side, whereas it sounds to me that you're saying that you actually have. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about what the experience was like for you and whether it was multiple experiences.
Okay. So my first experience, it actually was with a woman who died 4 different times. And the first time she died in a plane crash. And she had injured her neck so badly in the plane crash that there were several other times where the neck just slipped out of joint and pinched the nerves and just, caused her organs to cease functioning. She'd go back into another coma and pass on again. And during each one of these experiences, she had encounters with God. And one of the things that she said she came back with when I first met her was an ability to help other people have that experience without having to die to get there. And she felt like it was something very important for me to experience, for me to see. And it was the first of several that opened up for me. And in my experiences, I have to be very candid. I haven't seen anybody come from that side to here, and manifest in a physical way. But there is an experience of coming out of your body and going there. And in that space, I've not only had my own experiences, but I've talked with dozens of other people who have also had near-death experiences or other out-of-body experiences where they've encountered heaven, they've encountered God, and it's remarkable the similarities among some of these experiences. While they're all individual, God has a way of talking to each person in their own way, so that they can feel loved, so they can understand what it is they need to understand. At the same time, there are some things that seem to be very consistent. And one of those is the way in which people are loved. And so for me, my encounter, my first several encounters, I had the experience of meeting Jesus, and I got to feel that love in the heavenly space. It was an absolutely tremendous, a wonderful experience. And because, as much as in church and other places, people talk about God's love and how much he loves us, there's really no conception for it, because when we grow up, we learn love from our parents. We learn love from, our families, from our society, from others around us. And all of that love, as beautiful as it is, it's just nothing compared to the way that God loves. And so to be in that heavenly space and feel that, it opens up a whole new understanding of, oh, wow, I've been reading the Bible wrong all these years, because the way that I understood the word love wasn't the way that God loves me. It is so beautiful. It is so wonderful.
Yeah, definitely can agree with that and everything. So, how did you decide to come about writing the book? Because I know that sometimes folks are drawn to the book because they are inspired from above, or inspired from heaven, and all of that. Or is it something that has always been on your mind that you wanted to do this kind of research? So, how did this whole book concept come to you?
I've always been interested in spiritual things. I've read the Bible. I've read other holy books. I learned Hebrew so that I could read the Bible in the original. So I've always had an interest in this kind of thing, but I never had the thought that I would be having these experiences or that I'd be writing a book on it. In fact, I come out of a culture that's very, if you have experiences with God, I mean, yes, you use that to kind of say, hey, God is there and this is wonderful, but you don't share that experience in the way that I'm sharing in the book. So it was very hard for me to come out and be public in this way. Almost had to walk against the norms of my community. And sometimes that's a hard thing to do. I started writing the book for a couple different reasons. One, I wanted to understand what I'd seen, what I'd felt. And it seemed like writing about it was the best way for me to start thinking about it and to start looking at different things I might have missed. Because as beautiful as it is being there, there's a feeling like it's almost like your body is keeping you from understanding everything that you might understand. And so when you come out of your body and you're in that heavenly space, you're not understanding, you're not limited to the minds we have here. And so it doesn't matter how good you did in school, unfortunately. But there is that sense of, wow, I'm remembering something with God. I understand something about who I am, who he is. And when you come back into the body, some of that's lost. It's like you leave it there. And so you're constantly trying to rediscover, what did I leave behind? What did I forget? And so writing about it was a way for me to process it, especially because there are so few people that it feels like you can talk to. And so many of the people that I've talked to that have had near-death experiences, they're afraid to share them because most of the time their families, their caregivers, the people that they most want to open up to, they just won't listen to it. There's not enough trust there. There's not enough emotional safety to talk about something they experience that other people often don't understand. So writing about it was a way for me to kind of process those emotions, to come to terms with what I'd seen, what I'd felt, without having to be overly vulnerable with others. The decision to publish it, that's another matter.
Right.
I back in 2018, or maybe it was 2019, January 2019, I sat down next to this individual on a plane, and I had just been praying, and I was like, Father, I feel like I've written all this stuff, and maybe if I were to publish it, it would help other people, but I'm really scared. I'm scared to think about publishing it because I don't want to be out in front of the world and sharing these very intimate details that I've experienced. And a lot of times too, I think that there's some humility of looking inside and recognizing that for all that you want to help other people, you're not perfect. And so just thinking, how can I possibly put into words what I've seen in a way that actually helps people? And wondering, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I shouldn't publish it. I've written about it. I'm learning from it, and that's maybe enough. Just keep it for myself and maybe my kids someday. And so I prayed, and I'm like, if I am supposed to publish, I need a sign. I need something that just jumps out and says, do this. And so right after I offered this prayer, I end up getting on an airplane, and I sit down next to this young man who's got this huge manuscript he's working on and just writing all these notes in it. And I'm teasing him about the size of it, thinking, gosh, that really doesn't look like much fun. And he looks over at me and he says, actually, it is. And so then he tells me that he's a inspirational movie producer. He produces movies up to like $40 million budget, and that he has just finished writing his first book. It's a Christian inspirational on his granddad. And we get into this conversation about his book, and then he starts asking me what I'm doing. I'm like, well, it's interesting you mentioned you wrote this book because I just kind of finished writing one. I'm not sure if I should publish it. He's like, well, tell me about it. So we spent the whole plane ride just talking about the experiences that I wrote in the book. And at the end of the plane ride, he looks at me and he says, you know what, I really hope you do publish it because it helped me tremendously to hear the things that you were saying.
Wow.
Wow. I know that definitely Dolores comes out of the Christian background, and I know a number of the other listeners do as well. But when you were doing the research, did you find that these near-death experiences were across spiritual boundaries? Were they just within the Christian community, those that you were studying, or did you find some that were also in other international religions, be that Hindu, be that, because I know that one of our producers is of that faith, or be that out of the Muslim faith or a number of other faiths? So when you've been talking to these folks, have these experiences been coming from various cultures? And if so, what has been the differences of those?
I really appreciate that question. Because I came out of the conservative Christian mindset of this is the way heaven looks, and this is the only way it should look. And I didn't understand that heaven was bigger than how I saw it. But during the experiences that I had personally, I was shown different heavens. And there were, so for me, it's a very real thing that there are multiple ways that people can experience God coming from different religions. The Hindu heaven being one of those. And it has been a very lifting thing for me. And I think this was one of the reasons why it was hard for me to talk about it with the friends that I had, with the culture that I had grown up in, because for them, it was hard to understand, how can heaven be more than what we've been taught? And I wanted to just tell them, it's not like I'm taking anything away from you. I'm adding to. I'm helping you see a bigger picture. But yes. So after I had my experiences, it was such a shock to me, because I'm thinking, I'm seeing things that weren't part of my former belief system. And even going back and reading the Bible now, I realized that it wasn't that there wasn't room for it in the Bible. It's just that culturally, those things have been lost. They've been restricted. They've been taken away. And so as I went out and studied other people's near-death experiences after my own, I found that there are people from all different cultures that see God. And sometimes those experiences conform to one religious understanding, but sometimes they come from another angle. And what was important for me was in being a single person having these experiences is I felt like I was able to start integrating these ideas instead of them seeming like conflicting ideas of, oh, here's one person seeing a Christian version of heaven, and here's another person seeing a Muslim version, and here's another person seeing a Hindu version. It was like, wow, I've seen a number of these myself. And so it no longer, I couldn't say that whoever was seeing those was wrong or incorrect, or maybe they died wrongly. But that I couldn't doubt my own experience. I couldn't doubt what I had seen, what I had felt. And so I had to start changing my understanding of how I approach God, of how I approach heaven, and saying, well, if I've had these experiences of these multiple heavens and each one is beautiful. I mean, the analogy I give in the book is it's like coming into an ice cream store, and like your whole life, all your parents gave you was vanilla ice cream. You come into the store one day and find out there's chocolate and go, oh my goodness, there's another flavor of ice cream. And it's great and it's wonderful, and it doesn't invalidate how good vanilla can be on occasion, but that the chocolate ice cream is just to die for. It's wonderful. And that was kind of my experience of these different heavens, was that the heaven that I had been taught, that I knew, that I understood, it was beautiful, it was wonderful, but it did not invalidate the experience of these others. They were just as real and just as wonderful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. One of the things, and I'd love to hear from both of you about this, that I've oftentimes been surprised by is that in a lot of ways, even though there's these multiple religions, and I won't say it was one of our networks in terms of like the big networks, ABC or CBS or something along those lines, they did a special on world religions, and they found that the core beliefs were pretty much the same. That, no matter what your faith was, you pretty much wanted to, as Dolores was just talking about, you wanted to respect your elders, definitely respect your parents. You definitely wanted to respect the God force above, and definitely, you want to respect your fellow man and a lot of the other very core principles. But there's some of the extreme versions that might go the my way or the highway version and everything along those lines. But I was just wondering, do you find that a lot of our religions do share the same principles, and no matter what their belief systems are, whether that's somebody that might be a Muslim in Jordan or somebody that might be a Hindu in India or a Buddhist in Tibet, and but a lot of the core values are the same. So I guess I'll toss that to you first, Dolores, and then I'd love to hear from Brent as well, how you feel these core values can be very similar.
Okay, so as far as belief, that means for one that they do have a belief. That's one of the main factors. So it depends on, I guess, how you're grown, how you're taught, and what you believe in, and which direction you want to go to. For me, it's Jesus all the way. Only one way, and period. Of course, I know there's a variety of religion and all that, but for me, it's only one way. There's only one way to get to the kingdom, and that's by Jesus. And Jesus sacrificed his son, God the Father, to sacrifice, made the sacrifice for us to live and to live again. So if something happens to us or we pass away, that we can live forever and have an abundant life.
What is your thoughts, Brent?
So we can all see the differences in the religions. When you look at the practices, you look at the way people dress, the way that people look. The differences are easy to see. The similarities take a little bit more looking. And as you point out, that each of the religions are teaching their followers to love other people, to love God, to love other people. And the main difference comes down to, what do they believe about God? What do they believe about themselves and their relationship to God? But the fundamental path that each religion follows ends up being somewhat similar too, which is the setting aside of our will in order to realize a higher truth, in order to create a deeper connection with God and to grow, not just here in this life, but after this life as well.
That makes a lot of sense and everything, and I can definitely see where folks might have that attitude. What has been your reaction to your scientific community? 'Cause like I said earlier at the beginning, I know a lot of times folks try to divide science and religion. I mean, that's something that's even one of the principles of our Constitution, the division between science and religion, whereas you come out of the science world. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about, one, how the religious community has talked to you, but also how the scientific community has talked to you as well.
Well, it seems like the religious community is far happier that I'm a scientist than the scientific community is happy that I'm religious. So, um, but yeah, so I find that spiritually minded people really they like to hear from scientists and other individuals who've done a lot of study that have found faith to be a meaningful part of their life. It's tends to be very validating to say that there are people who have attained the highest academic ranks and learning to come back and say, yes, there really is something valuable in religion, in our faith with God, in that connection. The scientists, on the other hand, are a little less interested. It's because the religion of science is the religion of repeatable experiments. And so often with the spiritual experience, regardless of which religion or faith that we're talking about, it's an experience that we can all follow the same steps, but my experience is going to be very unique relative to the experience of anybody on this call or anybody listening in right now. And scientists don't tend to like that kind of thing. It's hard to quantify. It's hard to repeat an experiment. I have read a few studies where people are looking at the DNA changes in someone who meditates or prays. Others who are looking at how prayer might affect whether somebody gets better or doesn't. And they try to set up studies that can be repeated, but it's really hard to capture because sometimes what science misses with all of the numbers and the statistics, we as individuals experience. For an individual who has prayed really hard and seen a miracle in their life, a friend or relative healed from cancer or something else, that individual, there's nothing you can tell them. I mean, it happened. They saw it. They experienced it. And yet the science won't be able to pick it up because they can't repeat it. Because not everybody that prays gets healed. But that person that did pray, they know it was connected to their prayer. They know that it was connected. And so it's a harder thing to talk to the scientific community. But scientists as individuals, I mean, they're the same as anybody else. They're living their life. They have things that are going wrong for them, things they wish were better. And so to receive a message of hope as an individual, that's a beautiful thing. And I find some scientists they're very receptive. Others aren't so receptive. It's much like any other profession. I mean, you pick out school teachers or whatever, and you got some people who are really faith means a lot to them, and others that they don't want any part of it.
Yeah. Dolores, have you had any kind of experiences similar to what Mr. Satterfield has been talking about in the sense of near death or kind of like those times that you knew that faith got you through a troubled situation? And if so, can you share that with both me and Brent?
Sure. I haven't per se had a near death experience. I take that back. The one experience I did have, I was about 30 years old and I was in my house and I was mowing my grass, but I would have just a little bit of sharp pains like on my side. So I would cut my grass a little bit, come inside and lay down, on the floor just to have some coolness against my skin. And then I'd go back out. And so every now and then I would have this sharp pain on my side. So one day my mom came and is when I got my house. So we were gonna do my house warming, and I was gonna help her get some things out the car. And so I was like, I'll be out to help you in a minute. And I sat down for a minute, and because I started hurting, but I ain't want hurting them. And she came in, and she was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Nothing, I'm good. Give me a minute." So because I wanted to like get my strength together, and so I, act like nothing was going on. Because I don't like going to the doctor at all. And so, well, I didn't then. And then she's like, "Something's wrong with you. Something ain't right. So I'm gonna take you to the doctor." And I went to the doctor, and I was in the lobby, like on my knees, because the pain started to get really bad. And so my mom was like, my daughter is hurting bad. Y'all got to get her in, you know. And so they did testing and everything. And then come to find out, I had a dermoid cyst that burst, and it had grown hair and teeth, and it was cutting off my circulation, and I had no idea. You know, I just heard, felt a little pain every now and then, and I kept moving. And so they were like, well, we're gonna have to have surgery. And I was thinking to myself, I ain't finna get no surgery. I'll come back later, you know. And so they were like, yeah. I said, well, when y'all want to have the surgery? And they was just like, you can't go home, we're gonna have to have it today. And I was like, huh? And they was like, yeah, it's an emergency. So I didn't get a chance to leave. They had to I had to have surgery that day. They took out my right ovary and my right fallopian tube. And that basically really saved my life, because whatever was going on, it was cutting off my circulation. So if I didn't go then, it could have been the opposite way. But now I'm 42. Of course, it healed as I went back. But I was just in shock, but thank God my mom was there that sent something else and made me go to the doctor. Because if I was there by myself, I wouldn't have went. And I can't say what would have happened, if she wasn't there. But so thank God for mom having that intuition and that God fearing spirit in her to say, let's go and do it, and going to the right place, to the hospital down the street. And then, it took me about 6 weeks to heal. But I can still have kids later if I want. That was something major different for me. I've never had surgery ever in my life. And then to do it spontaneous, like not letting me go home and you gotta have it right now, that was like an eye opener. But I was so grateful that God allowed me to, for that time, and even with the housewarming and my mom to be there and me to go to the hospital and then to find out what was going on, to take it out and then to heal. And today I'm of course much better and I'm still here. So grateful for that. So that was one of my experience when I was 30. The only other experience I've had is when I was 3. Um, and it wasn't per se a death experience. It could have been bad. I pulled down a pot of hot boiling water. And I guess my mom was in the kitchen and all of that. You little kids and you see stuff and you're grabbing, and the boiling water, spilled all over me and basically covered my body. And so it was so hot, my mom couldn't pick me up and touch me. My skin had started peeling because the water was so hot. And of course, they took me to the hospital and everything. And then within a week, I was healed. And so I didn't have any scars. You know how you see people that's burnt or, have some kind of, if they got burnt, you kind of see it. You can't see it. I mean, my skin is beautiful. I had one, and you can't really see a scar, um, just slightly right there, just for me as a reminder, as I say, that it happened at 3. So at the age of 3 and at the age of 30, that was my experience. But with the help of the Lord, He allowed me to be healed and come out of it.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I know we all go through these kind of amazing experiences and everything. One thing that I was going to ask you, Brent, and everything, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, was I know that America was developed on the Judeo-Christian principles and everything, and we've also talked about the division between church and state and everything along those lines. As a scientist, do you think that that's something that we should be having, is that division, or do you think that it's something that we should be getting away from? Because I do know that there have been even movements among private schools to allow prayer in schools and all of that. But I was just wondering your thoughts, and I'd love to hear Dolores' thoughts as well.
That's a really hard question. And I know our founding fathers struggled with that. And they weren't really even dealing with the kinds of religious diversity that we have in our country today. They were just dealing with, one Christian denomination versus another Christian denomination and their thoughts and how to practice Christianity. And so to create that separation ensured that no one religion ended up oppressing others. And I believe that's still an incredibly important thing today, because none of us wants to see somebody from a different religious faith come into power in a way that suppresses our right to worship God, to express faith in the way that that we feel it. I mean, it's a very living thing, and I'm sure Dolores would agree on that. It's our faith it's living,
Yeah.
and so the thought of anybody ever suppressing that is just it's awful. At the same time, the thought that children aren't allowed to pray in schools when they want to pray, that's not really what I think our founding fathers were envisioning either.
Right.
And I think it's unfortunate that children of faith don't have the right to express that faith. If they want to pray, I would love to see them pray.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just Christian children, but children of any faith being able to pray in a way that doesn't, force those of other belief systems to participate or something, but to be able to express their own faith in a respectful way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What are your thoughts, Dolores?
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe prayer should be in the schools. However, at the same time, we can't control what goes on in there, but what you can control is yourself and what goes on in your family. It's like for me, I have my mother and father, three sisters and a niece, and so as growing up from a young child, we always prayed at home. Of course, we prayed at church, but everything for us started at the house. You know what I'm saying? And so, even till I'm 42 now, I'll go home. I live an hour away from my parents. I'll go home now, and then before I get ready to leave to come back, we'll get in a circle, hold hands, and pray that God covers me, God covers all of us, traveling mercies and all of that. What the awesome thing is, I have a niece that's 8 years old. And so my mom and dad, they pray at the same time, and we're just all around, holding hands. So the last time I believe I went home and we did that, my niece, she's 8 years old, she started praying out loud. And Lord, protect me and help me be obedient, and that helped me to make the right decisions. And I was like, wow, but it's in her, you know what I'm saying? Because that's how we grew up. And she's just more open and outspoken, and touched by the Holy Spirit. And it's just amazing just to watch her at 8 years old to do that. We grew up with it, we just let mom and daddy pray and hold hands. But this one right here, the youngest one, she speaks out. She starts praying like that, but that's a great thing because it's in her, and it will never depart from you. Once you train up a child in which they should go, it's in them, and that's a blessing. So, so my thing would be start at home. Whatever happens on the outside, at school, at work, of course, we definitely need it there for sure. But start where you are, start in your house, and that helps build the individuals up, the families, life, community, church, and everything else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Brent, when I was looking you up and on Potted and everything, which is kind of like a way that folks can find a great podcast and all of that, you had some terms that I was not familiar with. So I'd love to hear you talk about some of these terms because I was sitting there going like, and I know a lot of folks remember the scientific or the science fiction movie The Matrix, but you had something called the Master Level Matrix Energetics, and I'm going like, what the heck is that? So what are some of these terms like that? And also the Master Level theta healing, because like I said, as I was looking up some of the research, I was thrown off by some of the terms, but I was like, well, that's one way I can just do my own learning and ask the man himself.
So I've done a lot of studying. I mentioned that I started my studies just learning Hebrew to read the Bible in the original. I didn't want to miss anything that was written. And then as I started having these experiences with heaven where I was experiencing other cultures, I was it's this idea where Jesus says, in my Father's house are many mansions. It was just this understanding, wait, maybe these mansions that he's referring to, maybe it's more than what I've been thinking. Maybe it's more than just a place where I get to go and live, but maybe it has to do with the way that God interacts with all of his children in the world. And so as I started having these thoughts, I wanted to learn more from other cultures. I wanted to learn more from different ways of healing. And so I started going and studying with different groups of people, their version of faith healing. And so, we get some idea of Christian faith healing and how that would happen with prayer in the name of Jesus. And so, but what does a Hindu person do? What does a Native American do? And then there are other different types of studies on healing that some individuals have stepped back and said, what if all of these different ways of healing in the name of God, what if there's a pattern in them? And what if we can understand the pattern, almost like a scientific study of it, and then learn that pattern in a way that helps us to exercise faith in a way that produces more miracles, more healing. And so some of the things that were listed there under my profile, like the matrix energetics and the theta healing, those were a couple of different ways of approaching healing, ways of understanding healing that were not religion specific. And so, and it has to do with, like theta healing specifically, has to do with understanding how our subconscious affects our faith. That if you could get into the beliefs that we developed about ourselves as children, the beliefs that we received from our parents and from society around us, that we haven't even really thought about much, but go into making up our identity, who we think we are, who we think God is, that if we could understand more of those beliefs, we could let go of some of the things that prevent us from feeling more of God's love in this moment, and that prevent us from receiving more of that miraculous power in our lives in this moment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that I was also fascinated about you, Brent, and everything was the fact that you've gone through this journey, both the science and now this study of what's going on in heaven and everything. But you had also had your own personal journey, because as I was reading, it said that you were actually thinking about like even taking your own life as a child and then became a born again Christian. Can you share with our audience a little bit about that journey as well?
Yeah. So as a teenager, and probably you've got so many listeners that have actually had really troubled childhood lives. And I can't say that I had a troubled childhood life. I had a mom and a dad who were both present. They were very loving. They were very giving. Sometimes, though, our parents or caregivers in their love cause us the most affliction and the most problems. My dad was almost too present in my life, wanting to control the different things that I was doing, that I was learning. And without knowing it, he caused a lot of hurt to me as a child. And so, for example, I would work really hard on a test. I'd come home with a 98 on a test, which most parents would be like, great, that's amazing. You did wonderful. Mm-hmm. And my dad would look at it and say, well, why'd you miss this problem right here? Or I'd get 100 on the test, and I get them all right. He's like, why'd you miss the extra credit? So he also very much had the Southern kind of idea and tradition of spare the rod, spoil the child idea. And so I got my share of spankings. And when I became a teenager, I pushed back a little bit. I decided that I wanted to live my own life. And this was, I had a conflict with him. We ended up getting in a fist fight. I ran away from home. And so at like 14 years old, I'm having experiences with people that probably weren't very healthy for my ongoing development. And so I did develop some suicidal attitudes. I tried to take my own life a couple times. Very difficult time of life. And I ended up, I think like many people, where you find yourself at the end of your rope, I ended up turning to God. I ended up praying and saying, okay, I don't know what's going on with life and what it's about, but I really need some intervention. I need some help. And that was I want to say it's the first time that I felt God, but it was the first time I felt him in response to my own prayer, to my own reaching out. And it wasn't like anything that overwhelming in terms of seeing visions or hearing words or anything else, but it was just this comfort, this peace of kind of like you're broken, you're at the end, and then all of a sudden this blanket just comes over you, this warm blanket just envelops you, and it's like you just know that you're loved. And so from that point in time, I decided that everything I'd been doing like in my life up to that point, all my teenage years, were maybe going the wrong direction, and that I wanted to fix it. I wanted to do something different. So I decided that I wanted to devote the rest of my life to understanding who and what God was. I started going to church. I started praying. I ended up getting baptized. I spent a couple years in Brazil on a religious mission, and my life kind of developed from there.
Well, sounds like an amazing journey that you went through and all of that. So definitely, I'm sure folks are very much inspired by some of the words that you said and everything. One of the things that I'd love to hear from both of you about is this whole concept, and it comes to, and maybe it's because of COVID and everything, that a lot of people, but actually I think it was happening even before COVID, but more and more people are getting into these kind of mindfulness practices, and whether that's yoga, whether that's meditation. And I know a lot of that is also within the various religious practices as well. But I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about this increase in awareness and this increase in a desire for folks to be more involved in mindfulness and even on various other kinds of spiritual journeys as well. So I guess I'll start with you, Dolores, and then come to Brent. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about how we should be having a rise in people getting involved in meditation, yoga, and other mindfulness kind of practices.
Okay, awesome. So of course during this COVID time, it kind of shifted a lot of things that was normal. And so it allowed us to be even more open. And I know we've talked, several conversations with a variety of people of how um even though we're not in the church building, that we are the church. And so it still goes back to what you believe, what you grew up with, and your personal relationship with God. So if you have that relationship with God, even though we've been challenged, God has always been there. I know a lot of things. So, like, I've been working since I was 16 years old, just working every year, love doing what I do. But I will tell you the difference between this year with the COVID and everything going on. I'm paying bills, not being able to save. Is just coming in and going out and coming in, going out. But even during this pandemic, and I haven't worked since March, my other job, I've been able to save a little bit more. I've been able to get ahead in my bills. Maybe 3 or 4 months, that's my goal, to get like ahead in my bills. So basically, it's like the structure and just to sit down and reset and reevaluate how you're doing things. They thank God for the rest time, and then thank God for allowing you just to sit back for a minute and just slow down a little bit and kind of ask for directions. God, where do you want me to go? So for me, even with my business, Divine Connections, I've decided to, and I feel like I'm being kind of pushed this way too, is move it from part-time to full-time. There's more people that I need to connect with, more things I need to do. Of course, a lot of things, of course, are virtual, but just like the Black Business Expo, that was over 100 speakers that we connected with. And we were able to sit down and listen to what they had. The YBE, I connected with that this year. And then I'm doing things in my own business. So I'm like, Lord, He's the Jehovah Jireh. He is the provider. Our job is the source, but He is the resource. And so He will provide with everything that we have and everything that we need. We just have to trust in Him and believe in Him, and He'll make everything good. And then we'll look back, in the middle of this coming up year and the end of the year, I actually got ahead. I've never been able to get ahead, and I've been working since I was 16. And I'm like, God, you are awesome. You are awesome. And I know things happen. Of course, you got to pray more. A lot of people are passing away, and then that's another thing you want to do is kind of focus on. They say the grave has a lot of dreams. You know what I'm saying? While we're here on this earth, allow everything that we have that's within us, and that God has given us, our skills and our gifts and our abilities, just to work for you, because there's so much that we can do while we're here on this earth, and we have to maximize and be grateful for the opportunity that God has given us.
Definitely. What about yourself, Brent? What have you been noticing about this rise in mindfulness practices and things of that nature?
It seems like with so many of our distractions shut down from the pandemic, it's given a whole lot of people a chance to really reflect on life more. And I'm sure, some people have used the time to to create chaos in their lives. I mean, there's always a few people who do that. But for most of us, we've had a chance to really reflect this past year. It's been a year of reflection, a year to press pause on so many activities that have consumed our time. I love what Dolores said about getting ahead in her finances, kind of getting ahead in her life. Because it seems to me that as much as this year has been hard for many people, it's also been just a really great space of rest. And I have noticed among a lot of the community that I interact with a rise in mindfulness. So as you're kind of mentioning the meditation practices, yoga practices, other things, where, and even to the extent that they're not the meditation and the yoga, just more prayer, more thought, more reflection on what's going on in their life, what really matters, how to make their life better, deeper connection. And so all around, I would say that this year has, for all the negative things we've seen, and there's plenty in the news, but you turn off the news for 10 minutes and kind of pay attention to what's going on in people's hearts as they're learning more about themselves and the world around them. I actually feel like it's been a really beautiful year for people to step back from their old ways and reconnect to God and themselves in a new way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That connection that folks are trying to have on a lot of different levels. So I can definitely agree with y'all that that's what a lot of folks are doing, is trying to find that connection to the higher power, to God, and trying to find out a way to make that connection. Brent, I know that part of your work was in the field of science and everything in terms of the DNA research, and I would love to hear you share a little bit about that, because we actually have another show here where we have some of our medical people talking on Fridays and everything. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about how we're doing with the COVID vaccine, and in terms of just how we're doing in terms of the research and everything that's going on in terms of finding the cure and getting this herd immunity that I know so many people want us to have. So definitely, I'd love to hear some of your scientific research as well.
Okay. I do have a background in DNA research, more specifically in DNA testing. So the different types of tests that rolled out early last year, that's kind of my area of expertise. The vaccines, I can talk about it as much as the next person. Maybe I can understand the scientific papers I read a little more. But so I'm making that caveat that I'm talking about this as a uncredentialed person. But the vaccines, I know that there's been a lot of criticism in the news about how it was handled on a political spectrum. But from a scientist perspective, what we've seen is nothing short of a miracle. Vaccines have never rolled out so fast in the past. And part of that is the technology itself. There have been such huge advances in the technology. The mRNA vaccines, it's a brand new technology. As a scientist, I'm excited about it. You know, as I understand that it's hard to want to be the first person to try out a new technology. You know, when that new car comes out and nobody's driven it before and they haven't figured out what the bugs are yet. And so there can be some nervousness around that because nobody knows. I mean, what exactly is going to happen with it? But from a scientific perspective, the capacity to make vaccines with mRNA, it's huge. And it's not only huge in terms of the technology, but also the legislation, because there's two aspects to getting a vaccine made. And one is the technology itself. And if it takes you a year or two to get the technology ready, and then another couple of years to get the regulatory approval, it just takes way too long to respond to a pandemic like this one. But with the mRNA technology, there is the potential that in the future, should another virus come out, that within a matter of a week or two, they can have the design finished. And if they've got enough data already logged from past vaccines, then they can fast track it through clinical trials. And maybe within a month's time from the discovery of the virus to the launch of the vaccine, we could be at a space where we have the vaccine before there's a pandemic. And that would be absolutely amazing. And so this is nothing on, how the administration has handled the vaccine or anything like that, but just on the scientific perspective of the vaccine itself. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. No, both of my parents have gotten theirs. I don't know. Dolores, have yours gotten theirs yet and everything? Because I do know a number of folks are definitely out there getting theirs, and I know that mine have definitely got theirs recently. So what about yours? Have they received theirs yet?
My parents, no, they haven't got theirs yet.
So hopefully they'll be getting theirs shortly as well. I know a lot of folks are still in that line trying to get them, and definitely depends on the age range. It depends on what's going on, and of course some of those frontline responders and all of that. So definitely, hopefully, folks are checking that out and everything. You had shared earlier at the beginning some of the experiences that other folks have had. I'd love to hear you share some other experiences that folks can expect to read about in the book, and some of the more unique ones that you had in your book. So, Brent, if you can share some of the experiences that folks can get with the book and how they can get the book.
Sure thing. So the book is Bringing Heaven Home, and it's on Amazon. You can get it paperback or Kindle. Hopefully here in a few weeks, we'll have an audiobook ready as well. Then in the book itself, I walk through, it's a little bit of my life story. It kind of starts with me as a teenager, starts with some of the suicidal tendencies, my first experiences with God. And then it moves very quickly into my adult life, where I started having my first experiences on the other side, the full perspective. And I wanted to, I've spent a couple years working with different authors, trying to figure out how to say with our words what people have never experienced in this world. And it's been quite the journey. It's been, for anybody who likes writing or who likes poetry and other things, it's been a beautiful experience to try and take something so wonderful that words have a hard time conveying and put them into writing. I've loved that process. But the book talks about 5 different experiences I had on the other side. And the first one, and the second as well, I spent a lot of time talking with Jesus, interacting with him. And, coming as a Christian, that for me was the most phenomenal experience I could have ever expected to have, because it was different. And I don't know, Dolores, what you learned in your Sunday school and in church growing up, but for me, I always I saw Jesus as loving, but kind of like, don't get on his bad side because maybe he'll be upset with you. Right. And then, I also, I kind of imagined him serious all the time or like crying, because, in the Bible, it talks about him crying, but when I met him, I discovered that he has a sense of humor. Yeah. And it was the most shocking thing to me, because all my life I was almost thinking like, and I, I'm coming from the kind of church I grew up in, like you aren't supposed to laugh in church and other things. And because it's just a sign of respect. And so to be there and he's laughing and I'm thinking, wait, how can he laugh? And, but at the same time, it was so healing. Because it's almost like all of these concerns and these worries and these fears that we have, to be with him and have him look right into your soul and you feel it, because it's like his eyes are, it's like they go right inside you to all those places that even those people that love you most have never seen, have never understood. And it's like he's looking right at it, he's seeing it, he's understanding it, you're feeling accepted, embraced, and loved for the first time. And then his laughter just makes it feel like all of those things, they're not important the way that we thought maybe they were. And it's just healing, because you're able to let go of so much heaviness.
Wow. What was one of the most, you alluded to some of that, but what were some of the things that surprised you the most during these experiences about both heaven and about Jesus himself? Like I said, you said the sense of humor. What were some of the other things that surprised you during this experience?
So the thing that absolutely was the biggest surprise for me was how much love was there. It was a feeling, in trying to describe it, I've never found adequate words to say what the love felt like. But if you could take your brightest, most sunshiny day and then just multiply that times 1,000 or times 1,000,000, and it just fills your whole body and your whole being, to where there is a sense that you're absolutely accepted, absolutely loved, and that I think the biggest surprise for me was looking at what I thought were my mistakes, like looking back at my teenage years, the suicidal time period, and the times when I had made the choice to interact with people who were not good for me. um, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there who can relate. I mean, they made choices when they were younger that probably weren't the best, but I kind of expected that maybe there'd be like a life review or something, and then I might be shamed for those things, or I might feel ashamed. But it was so different than I was expecting, because I mean, while I was able to see all of these events, there was that kind of life review. Um, he wasn't saying, "Oh, look what you did here." He wasn't my dad. He was like, "Look at this one thing you missed on the test." He was, he's just like, "Look, you were a kid.
Right.
You didn't understand." And it was so wonderful, because he's like walking right into your space and helping you understand how you became what you became, helping you understand. It's almost like the judgment that he's saving us from isn't God's judgment. It's our judgment. He's trying to help us let go of all this hurt and all this fear and all this misunderstanding that we have for ourselves and for other people, so that we can feel the love that's always present. And I think that was the biggest surprise for me, because it was backward from how I was seeing everything. It was, oh my goodness, I've been so afraid of God's judgment, and it's not God's judgment, it's mine. And that's it's everybody else's, it's mine. I need to let go of that so I can feel his love now. And the other big thing was that we don't have to wait to get to the other side to start feeling God's love. We can feel it here and now, and it can be transformative for us. That the more that we let go of this heaviness, of this judgment, of this hurt, of this fear and this shame, that not only do we feel better, but that our lives start changing. A lot of the hardships in our lives, it's almost like it responds to us healing. The more that we heal, things start opening up in our lives, new opportunities, things that we might never have expected would have been possible for us in the past.
What do you say to those that might be skeptical about these things that you're saying that you went through and everything? Because I know I've got family members that are not overly religious, and they are definitely sometimes maybe even skeptical about the whole concept of religion and faith and all of that. So when you run across folks that might be skeptical about some of these experiences that you had, what is your response to them, and how do you try to win them over, or do you even try to win them over?
I don't even try anymore. When I was younger, I used to love to argue with people. You take somebody from a different faith, different religion. I'd love to just pull out different scriptures and have conversations and try to convince. But there is a change in me after having felt that kind of love and just felt that absolute acceptance for me. And so the phenomenal thing for me was God didn't try to change me. He just wanted to love me so that I could finally be me. And so after having felt that, after having experienced that, I want to do the same thing for everybody else around me. I want to give them a big hug and say, I love you the way that you are. And if that means that they believe in God, they don't believe in God, it's not a huge thing for me, because I want to be able to do for them what God did for me. I want to be able to see how.
I think Brent froze there.
Uh-oh. Did you catch it, Dolores?
Yeah.
Okay.
I see.
Yeah, Mark, I think your internet's a little slow or something. But I'll keep talking until you come back, Mark. But the feeling of I want to be able to give other people what. There you are. You're back, Mark?
There we go.
Okay. I want to be able to give to other people the same feeling that God gave to me, just that acceptance. Yeah. And, after my experiences, I went back and I read about some other people's near-death experiences. And one of my favorite was this gay teenager who he commits suicide. And so from my religious background, I would have thought, okay, if anybody was going to get to heaven and find out they did it wrong, it was him. And so, but he gets into God's presence, and he's almost expecting to be judged because all his family and all his friends had judged him his whole life. And he said what surprised him is that it was the first time he was not judged, the first time that he was absolutely accepted and loved and seen for what he was. And that experience touched me so deeply as this reminder that each one of us, even the person that really seems like they're messing it up, we all need to be seen in that way. We all need to feel that we are loved, to see past the mistakes that we've made, to see what is precious inside of us. It's like looking at a person the way that you'd look at a newborn or an infant, seeing that innocence that's still inside them. And yeah, it's got covered up a little bit because they're they're behaving in funny ways. But yeah, so I don't want to argue with them anymore. I guess that's the point. Just love them.
No, that makes a lot of sense and everything. I know I went to a Catholic university, and they oftentimes talk about the three aspects of heaven, meaning that there's heaven, but there's also kind of that purgatory middle ground, and then of course there's hell. So definitely, when you had this conversation and everything, was that what you learned as well in terms of what else is out there, or is it just pretty much that it's only like a heaven aspect, or maybe if you don't make it to heaven, you don't go anywhere else? So what was your aspect of learning in relationship to heaven, hell, or maybe even that middle ground, if you follow that practice in terms of what the Catholics believe?
So my upbringing certainly was similar. I learned very similar things. And, in my experience on the other side, I was not shown hell. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist for somebody somewhere. It wasn't what I saw. And I will offer my opinion based on what I experienced, that to the degree that hell is real, it's something that we create. And we create it by failing to forgive ourselves, failing to let go of the hurts and to receive God's love. Because it seems like on the other side, the only experience that God is creating for you is the opportunity to let go of all the hurts and all the things that you think that you've done wrong in order to be loved completely and fully. And so the only hell that I can even imagine existing in that space is the hell that somebody creates for themselves by not letting go, by not letting, it's like God wanting to give them a hug and they're saying, stay away, get away from me. And I can't imagine somebody doing that, but I can in a way, because sometimes people get so hurt, they get so caught up in the things they've done to other people, things they've done to themselves, that they can't let go. And when we see it in this life, we see it in the addicts, we see it in some of the people who get stuck in prison, that they're in such a state of shame and self-condemnation that they almost can't move out of it. They almost can't move beyond it. And just in that heavenly state, it was a lot easier to see, oh, wow, this is what God's seeing. And to let it go just in a moment. I mean, there is that shame, there is that hurt, but I can't imagine anybody intentionally hanging on to that once they have understood how beautiful the love is in that space.
Wow. Yeah, got so many questions that were running through my mind and everything. So I'm just gonna let Dolores take some, because I'm sure she's got some as well, and she's also got a journalism background as well. So I'll let her give a chance to ask you some questions as well. So Dolores, I'm sure you got some thoughts and some observations, and I know that you got a little bit of a journalism background as well. So go for it.
All right. So while he was talking, my thoughts was running as well. So I thought about the scripture in Romans where it says, the suffering of this present time cannot compare to the glory. So that even though we may go through things and good or bad, or when it gets to the worst, that God has another side of glory on the, if we can get through the storm, there's a brighter day. And then there's also a saying that heaven on earth. You don't have to wait until you get to heaven to experience heaven. You can experience heaven on earth. There's a lot of good things that's going on. And then if you're connected with the Father, He will give you some of that joy, some of that peace, some of that love right here on earth. And we can see it here and we can experience it here with ourselves and our family and others as well. And the other thing I was thinking about, as far as like if you have friends that's of other religions as well, You don't have to beat them down. People are going to believe what they're going to believe in. However, prayer is a powerful thing. Pray for them. I mean, I have a good friend that's a Muslim, and we're like sisters, but I don't put nothing in her face like that. I just pray for her. You know what I'm saying? And pray that she'll understand who Jesus is. But I don't roll it in her face. You know what I'm saying? And so the other thing was that be who you are. God is love. And because he is love, that's how we're created. You know what I'm saying? And we're supposed to do what God is doing with us. And that's basically what he said too. Just share the love. Love and prayer will break up a lot of things that maybe fussing or arguing can't do. It's all about God and prayer and, knowing he's the center of your life and knowing that what he can do, what he's done for you and your life and your family. And so just live the example, be the example, be the light that you need to be so that others can say, well, how did you get through that? Or how did you make it through that? Or, I want to know more about what you do or what you believe and just be the example that way.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Brent, I did remember one of the questions, and it actually comes back to even the COVID era that we just are in the middle of. Some people are saying that we're slowly getting out of it and things of that nature. But I was just talking to a friend of mine on my other podcast that I do on this platform who's in Pennsylvania, and their numbers are actually going up. So they're actually thinking that things could be a little bit more difficult in terms of their time of getting out of this pandemic that we're in the middle of and all of that. But we do see that sometimes when there's the most trouble going on, that's when the humans seem to have their most heaven-like qualities, and even Dolores kind of alluded to that and everything. So because of what's going on with the pandemic, you could even use Katrina as an example, even 9/11 as an example. That's when we seem to kind of get a better attitude and better attitude of being one with our fellow man and trying to support our fellow man and all of that. But it seems that as soon as that disaster is over, whatever that is, whether it's a multiple year thing like apparently this pandemic is because we're already in year two, or whether it's something that's immediate like Katrina that was they're still dealing with some of the effects, but the actual storm was only a matter of a day or two and things of that nature, or the attack which was literally on a day. But even New York is dealing with that. But a lot of times we have that very good feeling of connection between all of us, and then after the disaster has passed, we go back to our own ways. So I was wondering your thoughts on what I just said, and also what you might have learned from your heaven trip about that as well.
Okay, that's a great observation. With the pandemic, I noticed, especially in the first month, I mean, people coming together and they were just doing really nice things for each other and helping. And then, a few months in, we're already back into, which politician is doing it wrong and which one's doing it right, and all the arguments and violence and just a lot of really hard things going on. And so certainly we do see that disasters tend to cause the best to come out in humanity. And unfortunately, it doesn't stick for the whole of society. But I've found that the question I'm always being asked isn't how is society responding to what's going on? It's how am I responding to it? And what am I using it for? And with respect to your question of what did I see on the other side related to this, one of the biggest parts of the experiences I had to do with the transition of the earth from where we're at today into a space where it's much more beautiful. And we're basically in our bodies, we are experiencing the types of things that people in near-death experiences have on the other side, to feel that kind of heavenly love, that heavenly connection. And what I saw was that in order for that to come about, there have to be a few people who, despite the ups and downs that society goes through, that they continue to connect to that heavenly space. And within the context of their religion, whether they're Christian or Muslim or Hindu, that in their prayer, in their meditation, that they are connecting to something deeper. They're connecting to that love. And as they connect to it, starting to understand the beliefs and the hurts inside of us that keep us from feeling that love now. Because one of the big things that I was shown is that, again, just we don't have to wait to feel it. And And that's both in the kind of warm blanket that I felt as a teenager, but it's also the kind of really beautiful joy that exists on the other side. That there are hurts, there are fears, there are judgments in our bodies, that prevent us from just opening and receiving that love right now. And that as we heal those things, as we make progress individually, it affects the world around us. And this may be this is one of those concepts that I didn't get much of when I was in church on Sundays, but it was something that I saw there. Was that the way that our world is built? Um, it's based on a shared consciousness, that there are certain hurts, there are certain fears that are common to all of humanity. And for any one person to come through the veil that separates us from God, to see the love that's on the other side, it starts to unravel the illusion that separates us from feeling that love all the time. And so, for any person in their prayers, in their meditation, to start to feel some of that, it makes a difference. It starts to change not just their own ability to feel love, but it actually affects the whole world's ability to feel it. And one of the things that Jesus showed me was that when enough people, and not just in the Christian culture, but in all different cultures, were starting to come through that veil of shame, that veil of hurt, that veil of pain, and were able to feel that love, that the whole thing would come down, and that everybody who was left on the earth in that day would come through into this beautiful state of joy. That it was this amazing state of being. It was like a revelation, if you would, that was wanting to be given, but it wasn't a revelation in words. It wasn't a revelation in vision. It was a revelation in understanding, just the way that people feel as they are released from all that hurt, and they feel this amazing joy in the body.
Now, I know one of the famous expressions, and I'd love to hear from both of you on this, that people use about the Bible and about religion in general is that the end will come. We may not know the end time, but it will come, and everything of that nature. And nobody knows the time or the date of the resurrection and everything along those lines. So I was just wondering, what was your feeling, Brent? And then I'd love to hear from Dolores about that, because I know one of the famous expressions that everybody loves to use is that we don't know when it will have come, but it is a designated time. And some people feel that we're in the middle of those end days now. But I'd just love to know both of your thoughts, and I'll start with you, Brent.
So certainly that was the impression I had as I was seeing what I was seeing, is that we are in those times and things are changing. And what I saw is it doesn't depend on the world around us changing, it depends on us changing. And that it only takes a handful of leavening. Jesus said it just takes a handful of leavening hidden in the meal and the flour for the bread to rise, right? And so to the extent that there are a few of us who are undergoing that change, things are moving along the way that they ought to. Just like, yes, the rest of the world can look the way it's looking. It's going to change. It's going to reorganize. That's fine. But the important thing is that we are deepening our connection to peace and to love during that time period. And then as to the day and the hour, I was certainly not shown a day or an hour. In fact, there was almost an understanding that our faith is affecting when exactly that happens. It's like, not like God said, okay, on this date on the calendar, this is when it's going to happen, but more like when humanity has reached this point, when there are enough people whose hearts have opened, that are feeling that love, that is the time period it's going to happen. And so it's almost like it felt to me like it was a moving target a little bit, based on our choices, based on how much we choose to feel love and connection in the present moment.
Well, Dolores, what is your thoughts on that and everything, just in terms of the end times and the end parts of the Bible and everything? But how far do you think we are, and what are some of your thoughts about what Brent is sharing with us?
Oh, absolutely. I do believe that we are in the end times. And of course, they say we don't know the day nor the hour. in which He's going to come. So I believe that this time is giving us an opportunity to get ready, to wake up. If you need to get your heart right, get your heart right. If you need to forgive, forgive. Love lasts past everything. So open up your heart to Jesus, and then open up your heart to anybody that you're connected with, that you need to, clear any odds with, because tomorrow's not promised. We don't know what's going to happen tonight. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know if we'll make it to the end of the year, but however, each day is a blessing. So we take each day and each opportunity to get to, for one, tell God thank you that we still here, and then to allow us to get our hearts right so that we can return with Him when He comes back.
And that makes a lot of sense and everything. I'd love to hear from both of you. How important do you think it is to have that connection, not just to those here on the planet that we're on now, but to those ancestors? We've seen a lot of folks that have passed on, going into the ancestral grounds. Definitely with COVID, but even before COVID, I know that I'm a big fan here of a master dancer that was in our area, Papa Chuck Davis, who was very much involved in that, and Pierce, no, Pierce is the son, but Phil Freelon, who was a master architect and involved with a lot of things, but they've all passed on, not necessarily of COVID, but and they're more recent, but definitely there's other folks that have passed on even before that. So how important do you think it is to connect with the ancestors and all of that? So I'll start with you, Brendan, and go to Dolores.
Some cultures really emphasize connection to ancestors. And, for me personally, I've noticed that a lot of the trials, the struggles that I have in my own connection with God, they come from the difficulties that my ancestors went through. And so, my struggles end up being unique, both because I'm an individual, but also because there is no other person that's this exact genetic combination in this world. And so each one of us have inherited the struggles of our ancestors, the things that they did good at, the things they did not do so good at, their perceptions on God, their perceptions on other people. And so to connect with those ancestors, to learn from them, to learn about them, is one way of beginning to understand your own strengths and weaknesses and the places where you can do better. You can connect more deeply with the divine.
That makes a lot of sense. What about you, Dolores?
As far as the ancestors, my thing is you have to have your own personal relationship with God. Gracefully, I was in a Christian family for growing up. So my grandmother believed in God. My mom believed in God. Now it's, us. And then if we have kids, so, thank God that they had, the information and the belief in the God that, that we trust. And so, it all depends on who you are and the relationship that you have with your father. Every individual has to have that, their own independent relationship with God, because maybe, your grandmother, wasn't in church, but then there's like a breaking generations. I don't want to go through what my grandmother went through or my mother went through. I want to change my life. I don't want to be a crackhead or do drugs or do like that. I want to at least try to make right decisions and live right. So at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, whether your connections, if you have the connections or not, it's an individual choice for you as an individual to build your relationship with God.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. One of the things that I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this as we continue the conversation is one of the things, and it even comes back to Black Lives Matter and everything. That was a very big issue, and I know my friend Tree talks about that we were in the middle of multiple pandemics, not just the health pandemic, but also the race relations pandemic. And one of the things within churches that has always been out there for a while is that hour that goes on Sundays is also still in a lot of ways the most segregated hour in terms of the way of our churches and all of that. A lot of our churches are very much predominantly white or predominantly African American or predominantly Latin or a number of other denominations. So what are your thoughts about that? What did you learn about that, Brent? And then I'd love to hear Dolores, because we oftentimes hear that saying that one of the most segregated hours out there, and that I would argue even in 2021 is still one of the most segregated hours.
That is a spectacular observation. It's, I mean, as you pointed out, it's really obvious. It is. And I think it's sad. I was in Las Vegas a few months ago, and there was a teenager there. He's like probably 13. And I can't imagine that this child came from a home where it was encouraged for young boys to cry or be emotional in front of strangers. But he broke down crying in front of me, um, just talking about President Trump at the time. And he's like, he says, he says, the president doesn't care about me. And he's like, he doesn't care about my life, doesn't care about my safety. He's like, I can't take living in a country where my life doesn't matter. And I mean, it was just really interesting for me to hear this young boy, and he's afraid. I mean, very afraid. He's in tears. He's crying. And I'm thinking, I don't always understand the right or the wrong of a political situation, but what I do understand is that no child in our society ought to ever feel like they don't belong. No child ought to ever feel the way that this young man was expressing. They ought to feel loved. They ought to feel embraced. They ought to feel needed. They ought to feel included. And I don't have any of the magic answers here on how we create more integration between in our society, in religion and other areas. But for me, that is a major failing of a society. If a child can have that feeling where that they're crying and worried for their own safety, and in the United States, we're not even talking about some war-torn country or something, but to worry for their safety here, and that was a terrible thing for me to see. Um, and it's not something that I have any good answers for. I'd love to hear Dolores's thoughts.
Yep, exactly. Dolores?
For sure. All right. So with everything that has been going on, I see it as major exposure, exposure of things that's been going on for years. And now that it's out there, it just shows you what people's hearts are. There's a lot of hatred in there, but there's also a lot of love. So you see, so we've seen, a lot of things going on, but we've also seen people coming together. Um, we've also seen the food pantries, giving out food, the stimulus, whatever they do. The money is there. You know what I'm saying? So it gave us exposure of what's going on, and not that we were blind to it, but just to pull the curtain up. This is what's going on. This is where we're at. What can we do to help get things better? And then that goes back to knowing who you are, knowing the God that's in you, knowing the God that loves and spreading the love, so that young boy know that he is loved, that he is important. Somebody's gonna connect with him to let him know, hey, it's okay. This is what's happening, but know that you are significant. You know that you are loved. Know that you are special, and we have to pray for those people that have hatred in their heart. Because we want everybody to get along. We want to, but that's their choice. But we also just have to live the life and use our life and our experience as we can't control anybody else. I can only control me, and that's why the root of the family is also important. If you have that root, like I had, thank God for that, of, God first and loving God, and everybody unfortunately doesn't have that. But for the ones that do, and even if you didn't, God has a way of connecting you with people throughout your life. If you didn't have those people in your life, that shows you who God is, and being the best that you can be, and just loving on yourself. For one, there, with a lot of hatred, a lot of people are mad with their own selves.
Hmm.
They didn't love themselves. So you can act out, different ways and fight, but that just kind of shows me you don't know who you are. You don't know that you're loved. Whatever experience that you had in your life, either you're reacting to it or you trying to figure it out and you don't know how. And so, just, being in prayer for the country and the leaders, um, those that have the pure heart, we just have to pray for those that have hatred in their heart, and then pray that the nation will come together. But meanwhile, you have to be that individual to have a relationship with God, and just to show your love and love the people around you, and it'll make the world a better place.
That makes a lot of sense. Brent, one of the other questions that was crossing my mind is I was thinking about a lot of things that folks think about when they think of religion and they think of spirituality, and all of that is that question that is oftentimes even brought up in Bible sermons and everything a number of times. Because I know that one of the churches that I used to attend regularly when they met at Hayti, I know that it was a focus of several of their sermons, which is that whole concept of why do bad things happen to good people, and why does God and Jesus even allow that? So, what was some of the things you learned on your journey and everything about that? Because that is a conversation that is constantly going on in the church. That concept of why do why does the forces of God, the forces of heaven, allow these things to happen here on earth?
That is a wonderful question. And before I answer it, I just want to say something to Dolores really quick. I loved your answer. That was so beautiful and so needed. So, so your question, Mark, though, about why bad things happen to good people. And I can't say that I was up there and asking God and saying, why do, I mean, because there's so many questions that down here we want to ask, and we'd have like this notebook full of questions of here are the good ones. And, but when you're in that space and that experience, it's like all the questions are gone, because the things we think about here, they're not important in the same way there. We just, there's a different way of thinking, a different way of seeing. And so this is one of those experience or questions I would have loved to have asked. But from some of the things that I saw, the belief I have on that is that is we're not seeing it from God's perspective. And I mean, that's obvious, but we're not seeing it from his perspective in the sense that we're feeling like victims, like something's happening to us, and we're not getting the bigger picture. We're not seeing what's happening outside of these bodies. We're not seeing the growth that we're going through. We're not seeing how that affects our joy for here on out. And there is something spectacular in the experiences that we're having here. And this was, at one point, Jesus led me into God's presence. And there were a series of gifts that were brought. And as these gifts were coming by, I understood that they were my gifts to God. And I didn't have to ask what was in them, because I already knew they were the experiences of my life. They were all my hardships. They were everything I went through that I wished I hadn't gone through. And they were these gifts of, here is what I learned on earth. Here's what I experienced that nobody else could experience other than me, because no one else was in this body, having grown up in the childhood that I had. And that each one of us have, and I hate to use the word chosen, because we don't remember in this life choosing these set of experiences. Certainly, I think there's a lot of people that have gone through hardships. We think I would never have chosen that. But when we get to the other side, there's this understanding of, oh yes, this is exactly what I wanted, and I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. And those experiences that were hardest, that we thought were the most painful, were the ones that contribute to the greatest joy on the other side. And it's really hard to understand that until you've been in that space and you felt the way that it opens your heart. But I remember weeping, looking back at my hardest experiences and thinking, thank you, God. I didn't understand why I had to go through that, and that hurt so much. And I never thought that I was going to feel better again. But on that side, it made sense. It really did. And it was like the most important experience of my life, the one that I wouldn't have wanted to be without. I mean, I could have lived without all the other good experiences, but not that bad one. It was necessary.
And how far back did the memories go, even in terms of, like, you mentioned the life book and everything of that nature, and how it wasn't quite, I think a lot of us, we think of the life book almost as like you get to watch a rerun of a movie and all of that, like your life movie. So how far back did it go when you had this experience? Did it go all the way back to your birth and the baby, or did it go back like maybe to your early years, like 5 or 6 or 7, like that? Because I know even now, a lot of times we can only think about the memories that we've got right now on this planet and everything. So and maybe going back to like, I know in my case, I might be able to remember back to 6 or 7. After that, it becomes even more fuzzy than 6 or 7. But definitely, I think I can go back and have some memories of 6, 7, maybe even 8. And I'm 58 now, but I know I don't remember anything about my birth or those early toddler years, but other than what my parents tell me. But how far back did the memories go?
So, a couple thoughts on that. The first one, anything that I thought about, the information showed up. So I'm sure that if I had thought about being a baby and wondered about it, all that information would have come back in an instant. Those weren't the experiences that were shown to me. The other thought on this is, every person I've talked to that's had a similar experience, or they had some kind of a life review, it played out a little bit different, looked a little bit different. For me, it wasn't like sitting and watching, 18 years or 30 years worth of materials just in a long sequence of events. But it's almost like if you could just take your life as a strip of time and then step outside of time and look at the whole thing so that you can see all of it processing at once. And then certain key times in your life, those moments where something critical happened, you made a choice that seemed inconsequential, but it changed your life. And or one of those hard moments we were just talking about, those real difficulties. A lot of my life review was looking at those things that both the choices I made that I regretted, and also the things that happened to me that I thought, wow, how can I get over that? And it was like he was bringing my attention to rest on those moments, not because I needed to review them like I was being judged or something, but more like he could see that I was still feeling pain, that I hadn't let go of the pain yet, and he wanted to help me release it, to be able to find peace with my life, to be able to feel his love more fully.
This is actually for both of you. I know that one of my good friends is actually involved in the world of music and all of that, but he's actually got some interesting belief systems of his own and everything. And one of the things that he talks about is the fact that he doesn't necessarily think that there's just us here on the planet Earth. So, if from a spiritual aspect, what is y'all's own thoughts about that? Because I think that he sometimes feels that there might be other things within these great galaxies, meaning other beings or other folks that might exist that aren't necessarily just whatever we have here on Earth, be that us and the animals and everything else. So I just wanted your thoughts. I'll start with you, Brent, since you had this experience and everything, but I would love to hear Dolores' as well, because I do know he oftentimes talks about the fact that he feels that there are other things that are existing within our universe that we have not even discovered ourselves.
I wasn't shown anything on any of those subjects in my experiences. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised in the least. Just learning that there's more out there than what we know. And I mean, given that we assume that God knows more than we do, that shouldn't surprise us.
Exactly. What are your thoughts, Dolores? Do you think that it is just what we see here on this planet and there's heaven and earth, or is there other things that are there as well?
Well, definitely, for sure. We're on Earth, and definitely there's a heaven and a hell. That's for sure.
Right.
Those are the main things. But now as far as other things, like I guess when you read in the Bible and they talk about all of these animals and the way they were created and all that, like there's another spiritual side when you can, see all that, and the Bible talks about that. But of course, and the world is created, God created the world and he's awesome. But the basics of that for me, is earth, heaven, and hell. And then everything else, to each his own.
Gotcha. Brent, as a scientist, and just curious your thoughts about this. I know a lot of scientists definitely have their faith belief, and they definitely have a lot of beliefs within whatever their faith journey is and everything. But there are a number of scientists that also believe, and actually Dolores just kind of alluded to it, that evolution is something that is real. So I just wondering your thoughts on evolution versus creation, because there is definitely that conversation, and it's something that's always talked about within the scientific realm. I do know some scientists that are kind of like of the belief that both can exist. So I don't know what your thoughts are.
I struggled with that one personally all through college. It was really tough trying to reconcile what I thought my religious belief ought to be and what the scientific evidence was, and trying to say, well, is there room in the Bible for a different interpretation? Is there room in the scientific evidence for a different interpretation? And just trying to find a way to reconcile the two things. And I have to say, this is one of the reasons why I went out and started learning Hebrew to begin with, is I was hoping to find some loophole in the system where I didn't have to believe that evolution could not have happened based on a biblical standpoint. And I think one of the things that helped me early on is I found the writings of a very prominent scientist from back in the early 1900s who was also very religious. And just seeing how he balanced his beliefs between religion and science, it helped me some, because he kind of explained the fossil record in the earth and all the different layers of rocks and everything else as being God's handwriting directly in the earth, that we have God's handwriting in the Bible that somebody basically translated. It went through them and they wrote it down, and then we have God's direct handwriting in the earth. And that scientists were trying to interpret and translate what God had written in the earth. And I was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense, and that I like that. And so it allowed me to look with greater sincerity at the types of evidence that have been there for and against evolution. And certainly the fossil record and all of the different types of layers of rocks that have been, the different types of carbon dating and other types of atomic dating, all of these clocks, if you would. And this is one of the things that this scientist said in his book, is he's like, you've got all these clocks, and each one is running based off of a different power source. You've got like moon dust collection, you've got the rate of sedimentation in the earth, you've got the different rates of nuclear decay, and all of these clocks point to the same time period for the origination of these species in the world. And so whether evolution happened or not, it does suggest that the species appeared at different time periods in the Earth's history. And then evolution is mankind's best guess as to how that happened. And so as far as I'm concerned, scientists are just trying to answer the question of how God did it. It's not because they really can't answer the question, is God there, is he not there? Because it's not something they can measure. But what they can measure is, when did these species appear? How did they show up? What are their genetic variations? And so right now, evolution is just the best theory we've got for how the data showed up the way that it showed up in terms of a scientific explanation.
And one of the other things I'd love to hear from both of you on this and everything, and I've got one that, since you said that Jesus has this sense of humor, I'm going to add to the sense of humor in a little bit. But a more serious question is, a lot of times folks are also wondering about the Bible and how much of it is literal and how much of it is figurative, because there are some passages that some people take to be like the total literal truth, including like the burning bush and a number of other stories that are within the Bible. So I guess I'll start with you, Brandon, then come to Dolores. But how much of the Bible do you take as being fully literal, or how much of it do you think might also include some things that might be figurative kind of narrative stories that are within the Bible as well?
My understanding has changed as time has gone on. And some of that, because I started off with a very literal interpretation of it. As time has gone on, as I learned Hebrew and started studying the pictographs that they used to write their language in the early days, they had a way of communicating ideas. For example, if you take the Hebrew word medabel, it means I speak. And I was kind of having a conversation with God one day and saying, okay, well, I don't understand how these pictures mean I speak, because in that word, you get a picture of water, you get a picture of a tent flap, and you get a picture of the tent, and you get a picture of a head. And I'm like, so what does water, tent flap, tent, head mean? Like, how does that mean I speak? I don't understand. And I'm going through this process and finally get frustrated with it. And I'm like, you know what, this whole symbolism thing in Hebrew, it must not work. I'm just throwing it out. And a couple minutes later, I just had this sudden insight of like, you're looking at it wrong. You're looking at the images literally. You can't say water, tent flap, tent head and have it make any sense. You have to look at it and say, what are the properties of these things? What's the properties of water? It flows. What's the property of a tent flap? It's an opening. And I already knew that in the old Hebrew, that the tent conveyed, you could be inside or you could be outside. So it's either in or out. And then there's the head. And so it's like, well, what flows from the opening in the head? And it just all of a sudden like, wait, oh, that's you talking or throwing up. But it's something that's coming out of the mouth. And so in seeing that, I realized that the ancient Hebrews think differently, or they thought differently than we think today. Their way of seeing the world was through symbols and through properties and through metaphors. Whereas today we're a lot like lawyers. We want to see it written down and it means exactly this and nothing other than this. And that way we don't get in trouble, right? When you get on the right side of the law or the wrong side of the law. But that wasn't how they thought back then. They thought in metaphors. And so if we read the Bible the way that we understand the world today, we're not going to get the same understanding as if we read it the way they understood it then. And they understood it metaphorically. And so I don't personally have knowledge on how much is literal and how much is metaphor, but I do know that they thought very metaphorically.
Gotcha. What about your own thoughts, Dolores, in terms of whether it's a literal book or whether it's a book that has some metaphors and some other kind of narrative forms within it?
Yeah, so it's a lot. So that's a major question. That's a major question. So of course, the things in the Bible you believe to be true, but then some things were taken out of the Bible. So where is that stuff? And then it was written overtime and overtime and overtime. And then you have the things that they say is in the Bible, but it's actually people and tradition. When it's Christmas time and we celebrate Christmas time, Jesus died and he rose, but was it on December 25th? And then you have
Right.
you have the Bible, but then there's another Bible, and I can't remember the name of it, but then that Bible goes in order. You know what I'm saying? In order of, and that's not the Bible that we per se read with the King James Bible. And then you have the King James Version, and then the Message Bible and the Amplified Bible. It's so much. It is so much, and so that's when you really have to have that relationship with God, or have somebody that's connected with you that really understands all this stuff, because it can be confusing and did God say it or did some man-made say it? And you know what I'm saying? Because we just see so much traditional things, but what is the core and what did God originate? When this was going on, or in the Word, or how did this play out? And then you have, when I was studying the Bible in some Bible classes, then you have Jesus, and you have he's he's who you need him to be when you need him to be it. He's Jehovah Jireh, your provider. He's Jehovah Rapha, your healer. There's so much, and you really just have to be connected with somebody that really knows, what the word is, and then really pray that the Holy Spirit, and it says the Holy Spirit is a teacher as well, and the Holy Spirit will teach you the truth as well. So that's a whole lot in what you just asked about, because it's so much out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. I appreciate your insight. Yeah, definitely appreciate those insights and everything. How important, as you went through this journey, Brent, was it for you to have those religious leaders, even within your own church or within your own faith community, to help you get through the thoughts of what you went through? So how important was that? And did you have a lot of conversations with your own faith leaders about what you went through?
So the importance of faith leaders, it's hard to overstate the importance and the evolution of our human journey. For me personally, going from a suicidal youth to kind of a well-rounded adult, it was those faith leaders that helped me make that transition to be present in society, to be productive, to be able to put together a life that had meaning for both myself and others. When I started having the experiences, it almost transitioned a little bit, where some of those faith leaders, I didn't feel as comfortable talking to them because it was almost like their job was to represent what the religion taught, what the religion believed, and not necessarily to help me understand the experiences I had that didn't fit into that view. And so it became, so we're on at the beginning of my journey, they were lifesavers. They were what I needed. And then later on, they were kind of like, they were the resistance I needed to continue to grow and develop my own connection with God, so that I wouldn't necessarily be relying on another person for that connection anymore, that I could start connecting more directly and trusting that inspiration for myself.
That makes sense. Dolores, how important are the faith leaders in your life?
Oh, very important. Because it's all about the power of getting understanding. Of course, they can teach, and they can teach and allow you to get even more insight of the word and understanding, which is powerful. Um, but at the same time, you have to be very selective of who you're listening to see if they know what they're talking about, because some people can, research and really get into the word of understanding, you know what I'm saying? And then some people you may listen to and you just wonder what they talking about, to see if they know, if they talking about the God that I'm serving, what they talking about, so it's very important to be connected with that. So it's vital that you're connected with a person that understands the word. And then, of course, your personal relationship with God and the Holy Spirit helps with that as well.
Now, the lighthearted moment I was going to have with you, Brent, and everything, and this is just a conversation I've had with a couple of friends of mine and everything. We love how a lot of times the Bible starts from like almost the teen years or maybe the preteen years all the way up to Jesus' death and everything. So when you were having this encounter, did he share anything about his early years and everything? Because that's something that we don't see in the Bible. Is we know Jesus was born, we know about the birth to Mary and Joseph, but we don't really know about those baby years, and we know that babies are going to be babies and young people are going to be young people. So I'm sure that he had those kind of moments as well. So that's kind of my lighthearted moment and all of that. So I was wondering if he shared anything with you about his early years.
He did not. It would have been very fun to see those things. But I have nothing new to supply on those missing 30 years of experiences.
Because that would be interesting to see, because I know that that's something that a lot of folks are curious about. And as a mother, I'm sure that, as one that has got her mother still in her life, I'm sure that Dolores has also thought about that as well. Like, what kind of child was this person that went on to be everybody's savior and everything of that nature? Because I'm thinking he might not have been, he might have had those moments of being a child.
He might have been a perfect child, which meant he was acting out or doing other things. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, if you had this experience that Brent had, what are some of the things that you would have asked? Like I said, Brent had this pleasure of actually going and having the opportunity to meet Jesus and God and all of that. I know that we all hope to do that in the end time and everything and have those experiences, but he's back on this side of the earth and everything. But if you were able to go do that and then come back, what were some of the questions that you would be asking Dolores?
Oh, geez. Oh my goodness. Well, first, as a woman, I'd like, you need to talk to Eve, because that thing we have to do and deal with every month is a curse. If you go back and reverse that, I hate the pain and the things that go with that. I always say, when I get to heaven, I'm gonna slap Eve. Oh my goodness. I don't know. I'll let Britt go. Britt, you go for it.
What are some of the other questions that you did not get to ask that you would like to share or ask if you got to go on a second trip or a third? I can't remember you went on.
Why I couldn't stay there?
Yeah, that makes sense. So, would you describe it as seriously paradise from what you saw? Because that's what most people think of. They think of it as like paradise with like maybe the what we visualized as anybody's paradise and all of that. So would you agree that that's what you saw is something that looked very paradisical? I might have made up a word.
I understood you either way. So
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because we think about what you'd see. And I mean, because here, well, that's what we want. We want to be on the beach. We want to see palm trees. just beautiful sights. And because we see our sight is what we experience the most in this world. And so that's kind of how we construct a beautiful experience. For me, on the other side, sight was almost not important. It was like it was not an important sense. And it wasn't that I wasn't seeing, but it was more that there was this feeling that was so overwhelming that it consumed everything else, and that there happened to be visions going along with the feeling, but it wasn't the most important part of it. The paradise wasn't what you were seeing. It wasn't what you were hearing. It was what you were feeling. It was like this eruption of bliss. And I don't know if it'd be appropriate to say this here or not, but for others that I know who've had near-death experiences, the only way they found to describe it is to say it's like an orgasm times 1,000. It's a feeling. It's an eruption, and it doesn't stop. It just keeps growing and going and getting bigger. And it's just in a very loving, lifting, blissful way. And so I would definitely call it paradise, but not paradise because of what you're seeing. Although I guess that could be wonderful too. I got sidetracked with some of the things I was seeing. Like I was looking at the water in the fountain. I was looking at the wood on this temple that I was nearby. And it's just like I was looking at the indentations in the wood and all of the structure in the wood. And it's like the deeper I looked, the more I could look into it. There were more colors and more depth. And it was almost like it was alive, like it was a living thing. And that every color and every layer inside there was all speaking to you. It was all like, it was all love. And it was communicating love. And it was just the most amazing thing to just, and like here now, I mean, I can look around my room and I look at my hand, or I look at the desk, and I'm like, I'm not that enthralled with it. It's kind of boring. But there, to look at just the grain in the wood, or just a drop of water, I felt like I could stay there for years and just be enveloped in it, because it was so beautiful and so uplifting.
Wow. Well, I've got another guest that I'm going to bring in, and I'm sure he might have some questions and some thoughts as well and everything. But it's a good friend of mine who's done a lot of research on a number of things. He's just a great guy and everything. We actually have a show called The Gamers Den here on this platform as well, which is about the gaming industry and all of that. But definitely Jacoby is, I think, a person that's involved in faith and a lot of things along those lines, but he's definitely might have some questions for God as well. So I'm going to bring Jacoby into the conversation. And then I do have good news on a local level and everything, which is I just found out that the $1,400 stimulus has passed. So apparently we're all going to get our stimulus check very soon as well. So I just saw that news break just came across. So we might have to wait for several months before we get it. Jacoby, I've been having this great conversation with Dolores and Brent. Brent has actually written a book about his journeys up there to heaven, and he actually had the pleasure of meeting and talking to both Jesus and God. Dolores works with Divine Connections, which is a magazine based here in this area that definitely supports a lot of our gospel community and all of that. And I know a lot of times, even on Facebook, you're oftentimes having some very philosophical discussions and everything. So we were actually just saying, and one of the questions I've always wondered is what Jesus would have been like in his young ages and everything. Brent said that he did not get any kind of thoughts on that in the experience that he had and all of that. But definitely, I'm definitely thinking that you might have some thoughts about folks that go through near-death experiences. And I don't know whether you've ever been through one or not, or had folks that have in your family that have. But that's part of what Brent has gone through and had the pleasure and has now written a book about. So, Jacoby, glad to see you pop in, and that's what the conversation has been about.
It's just an interesting conversation. So I was just sitting here listening to everybody discussing, trying to think of what I can add to the conversation.
Well, one of the questions that we were just asking, because I asked Brent, and he said that his question would have been like, why can't I stay here? And I also asked Dolores, and she was upset about, of course, what women go through and everything. So she really wants to jack slap Eve, but she basically said it and everything. But that's just my interpretation of that and everything. So if you had the opportunity, because Brent has said that he's had the chance to speak to both Jesus and God, if you had the opportunity to do that same kind of thing, what kind of questions would you ask of Jesus and God?
What kind of questions? I mean, that's a tough thing to think about. It kind of relate. So, okay. See, I've got to be the random guy to come in and add in some different analogies and connections. For example, I've gone back and started rewatching a lot of the old Star Wars stuff, from Star Wars Clone Wars, which was a great cartoon, great animated cartoon, to Star Wars Rebels. Well, in just a recent episode, which was a recent episode being the one that I just recently watched, they talked about the light and the dark, which is a huge theme throughout the whole Star Wars mythos. Um, they talked about they have these hollow cubes, or these cubes of knowledge, where you have the Sith, which of course the Sith are evil. You can relate those to, doing bad work and this and that and the other thing. You also have, of course, the Jedi Knights, who are always doing good. So you have the good and evil battle. But you have these hollow cubes that hold the knowledge of both all of the Sith. So you have an evil one that can only be opened by those who believe in evil or have that Sith mindset, and you have the Jedi hollow cube, which has the knowledge of every Jedi. So of course you have, if you could say, one would be the all the knowledge that Lazarus could have, and then one cube could be all the knowledge that Jesus would have. If you combine the two, you have just you have the greatest knowledge of all. You're able to see everything and anything. In relating that, of course, to religion and everything else, I mean, which, that's really what a lot of Star Wars is. Does that would be a question. Then is that symbolism the same? Does Jesus have the same knowledge as Lazarus, or does God have the same knowledge as Lazarus, or does Lazarus have some knowledge that God does not have? So that would be a question that I would like to find out. I mean, that would be something that I would ask.
Yeah, that'd be a good question, and a long question. What are your thoughts on that, Brent, and everything? By the way, Brent has also got a deep scientific background as well, because not only has he had these experiences, but he is a DNA scientist that's done a lot of work around some of the DNA testing that's gone on with even some of our COVID experimentations in terms of vaccines and all of that.
I'm not sure that my DNA testing background gives me any room to comment on Star Wars technology in context with religion, but it's still fun. So, but I think the idea is reasonably sound to say, if you were in God's presence, do you have some kind of a cube or some kind of other technology that you could give me that if I were to eat it or look at it, or that I could download all of this knowledge of all of these different prophets, or to see the mysteries of heaven, or understand it all, to get this vision of the beginning from the end, I think there's some validity to that question, and it seems to me to be a worthwhile one. It's really fun for me to read all the different experiences people have meeting God and near-death experiences.
And what are some of your thoughts about that?
Mark, just to add on to the question, because Christianity is just but one belief amongst 1,000. Would there be, in that same sense, if God of the belief of Christianity and Catholicism and so on and so forth, would his knowledge be different of Hinduism and Buddhism and stuff like that? Would they have a separate knowledge? Seeing just one deity.
Well, that's one of the things that actually Brent was saying that he went through, and that's actually one of the things that I think Dolores does not necessarily agree with and everything. But he was actually saying that he saw several heavens and not just one heaven. It was, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so if you will explain it to Jatovi, but it seems to me you were saying it was like almost like a Hindu heaven, Christian heaven and different heaven rooms and spaces. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yeah. So, Jesus' comment that there are many mansions in his father's house, that, I'd always interpreted that as different, different forms of a Christian heaven. But the things that I saw on the other side implied to me that maybe some of those mansions have to do with other religious thought, other cultural thoughts, different ways of experiencing God. And it wasn't like, there were all these different paths and they were all leading to the same place. The experience that I had was almost very much of a kind of like being in this world. You want to live in the US, you want to live in Europe, you want to live in Asia and Africa, wherever. It's a choice. And it's not a moral choice on where you live. It's just like, okay, do you like palm trees? Do you like mountains? What is it that you like? And where do you want to live? And that each of these different heavens had, they were like different flavors. They were different experiences. The feeling inside was vastly different, all joyful, all beautiful. Any one of them, I'm thinking, goodness, I'd like to live in that one or this other one, and asking the question, how do I make a choice between all these heavens? and did I pick the right one in my youth? I felt a little bit guilty about it, even just asking the question. But I heard a voice speaking to me that said, I am the light that is in all things and through all things. And in that heavenly space, it really is. It's like this feeling of there's light in everything. So the light that's in all things and through all things, and that means the light that is in all religions and through all heavens. And there was this understanding that there may be more.
No.
Nope. I think Brent froze. So hopefully he'll come back, because he froze there for a second and everything. Hopefully he'll come back and everything, because there definitely is a freeze going on there. Dolores, what is your thoughts and everything? I know you're trying to reach out to a friend that might be interested in the conversation as well. Oh, there he goes.
I'm back.
Oh, yeah, you're back. Now you were sharing the room analogy and everything.
Yes, so I was saying that I heard a voice when I was seeing all these different rooms saying, I am the light that is in all things and through all things. That means the light that is in all religions and through all heavens. And there was this understanding that if there were any heaven which were the greatest of all, which would be God's heaven, it's the heaven in which all flavors, all light, all truth is allowed without any judgment. And that was my experience there.
So, because I know you said that, in that comment, you had said that in the greatest house, which was God's house. But I guess that's where my question lies. Because in many Asian cultures and so on and so forth, you have the yin and the yang where they're equal. Is there an equal to God's house? Because if you're saying that,
okay.
If you're saying that God's house is the ultimate house above everything, wouldn't that be a judgment on the other houses? Because then if you cannot judge, then you cannot say that one house is less than the other or one house is greater than the other. So it's just, I don't know, just the fun of putting all the pieces together. It
is. And so the analogy that I have for this, and again, this is just my experience of it. And it was, if you could take, as a child, if you're given ice cream, your parents say, you've only got enough money to get one scoop of ice cream. And you go your whole life thinking you can only get one scoop. And then the day comes when you realize that your dad is the owner of the whole ice cream store. And you're the heir or joint heir to that ice cream store. And so the question then becomes, which flavor do you find joy in? And if you find joy in just one flavor, you can have just that one flavor. And if you find joy in all the flavors, you can have all the flavors. And so it's not like necessarily a judgment of you had the vanilla ice cream when you could have had the chocolate. It's just which one brings you joy, or do multiple bring you joy? And that was kind of the sense that I got. It wasn't like God's kingdom is greater than all the others. It was more like God's kingdom is inclusive of all kingdoms.
Well, that's where, like I said, with the yin and the yang, even with the analogy, if instead of having your dad being the owner of the ice cream shop. And I mean, everybody experiences things differently, and it is such a beautiful, fun mystery and so much fun to dive into because, as you said, everybody has their own, like with the ice cream, I love strawberry. Mark may love vanilla. Um, Dolores may love mint chocolate chip, and we each have our own, and none is greater than the other. And the ice cream was just given to us and not anybody's owner or not anybody's dad's owner or anything like that. So the idea that that's where the whole question comes from. If the yin and yang is saying that there are two sides that are equal, if there is God's house being just one house, and then Shiva's house being one house, even the Buddhist temple being another house, are they all equal, or are those the flavors of ice cream that people are choosing, and not saying all these flavors are here, but God owns them all?
Right. And my analogy, those would be the flavors. Yeah. And again, this is just my experience. I can't say what somebody else would have in that space, but that's how I experienced it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the other things I was just curious about is there's oftentimes, and actually, Jacoby just kind of alluded to it, kind of what I call profit comparison. Did you get any sense that that was even going on up there as well? Like, did you get the sense that maybe, comparison between Jesus and Moses and the various other prophets, whether they thought of themselves as being one greater than the other or lesser than the other? But what was your sense of not just the prophets, but also the disciples and everything? Did you get a sense of their hierarchy, for lack of a better term?
I didn't get to meet all the people that are up there, but the the little bit of conversation that I did have, there was no prophet comparison whatsoever. And even as I've gone back and read hundreds of near-death experiences after this, the thing that fascinates me is you got people from all different religions around the world coming into God's presence and having an experience. And never once does he look at them and say, you did it wrong. and so that fascinates me, is that if he cared about as much about a religion as we do, wouldn't you think that all these people dying and going to see him, that at least once he would say, hey, maybe you should change your religion. Maybe you should do this differently. And it's fascinating to me that in none of the experiences I've read, it never happens.
Wow. Well, I know you said you got to get ready to bounce off and everything, and I still got a few more minutes to go. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with you, Brent, and everything. But one of the things I always ask all my guests before they get off and everything is this concept of what kind of messages of positivity they would like to share with the world and with just society in general. We are on the International Broadcast Media Network, and I know that a lot of times we've got listeners from places as far away as South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, and a number of other places. So any words of encouragement that you would like to give to folks, I'd love to hear your words of encouragement and any words of positivity that you can share as well.
Yes. First off, this has been delightful, Mark, and I've enjoyed the conversation with both you and Dolores and Jacoby now that he's jumped on. So, and I would love to continue the conversation on the light and the dark side more. But so as far as for your listeners and just something positive to say, and I love that you asked that. I think it's probably the most important question. And for me, it's that you're loved and that you matter. Going back to that question earlier, that teenage boy who's just like, gosh, I'm afraid and I don't know if I belong in the society. And the answer is like, yes, you do. You absolutely do. And that every single one of us deserves to feel loved, to feel important, because we are. And I'm not just speaking that from my perspective. It's the way that I experienced heaven. It's how heaven sees us, that there is no one, literally no one who can have the experiences you're having in this life and the hardship you're going through. That's part of it. It's defining who you are, your experience. And that experience, for reasons I don't fully understand, it's very valuable to heaven. It's beautiful. The experience of you being you just as you are, just know that you're loved, that you're cared for, and that it does get better.
Wow. Sounds great. And it definitely sounds like something that can be shared not just here in the United States, but also Australia and all the various other parts of the world as well. So it definitely sounds like a very universal message is one that you were sharing that and everything. If folks are interested in getting the book, tell folks about the book and also how they can get the book, because I know it's a book that you've written. And like I said, I learned about you through Potted, which is a great way to find amazing guests and everything along those lines. But definitely, if you can share a little bit about the book and how folks can get the book and what the book is about in a quick summary and everything.
Okay. So the book is Bringing Heaven Home, and it's available on Amazon, paperback or Kindle. So again, Bringing Heaven Home on Amazon, paperback or Kindle. And it is about my experiences over a period of years, 5 different experiences that I had on the other side, and the learning that I went through as a result of those different experiences.
Definitely appreciate it and everything. So I know Dolores and Toby, before Brent bounces off, do you have any quick questions for him that you might want to ask just based on what you've learned? I know you're brand new to the conversation, to Toby, but Dolores, you've been here with us since the beginning. So any quick questions that you might want to have for Brent before he has to bounce off?
I know that I'm going to stay connected with you. I'm not sure. Did you give your social media or how people can stay connected with you?
Oh, that's a great question. I should have said that, right? So you can connect with me at innerworldmovement.com, and the handle on Instagram also Inner World Movement. So it's just a group of people that I interact with that we're very interested in people who want to start feeling more of God's love in this life. They don't know where to begin, how to start accessing those subconscious beliefs that keep us from feeling it. And so we are putting together events, activities, other things to go along with the book to help people have that transition. And whether you're connecting with us there or somewhere else, I mean, reach out. That's the whole subject of the book, is we were never meant to do it alone. That we have help. There are people here that love us, that are willing to help. And if you don't have somebody like that in your life right now, then just open your heart, pray, and someone will show up. There are those angels that show up in our lives. Use them. And if it happens to be us, we're happy to be part of that. That's innerworldmovement.com. Again, Instagram handle at innerworldmovement.
Yeah, there are a couple of folks I might have to put you in touch with as well, including some that are here on this platform on a regular basis. I know that Aliana Grace does a thing called binary spirituality, and she's actually in Jordan right now, but she believes in a lot of that kind of connection of like-minded people and positive people and all of that. So she's definitely got some very good, positive religious views and spiritual views as well. So I need to put you in touch with her. And then I also need to put you in touch with some folks that I know that are in that whole wellness space, including Chrissy Key Rollins and Tish as well. I'm trying to think of Tish's last names, but she has Earth Monkey Healing. But they are all part of this movement of healing that's going on around the country and kind of folks connecting in that way. So there's some of the folks that I'm gonna put you in touch with, because they oftentimes are talking about what they call light warriors. And I don't know if you ever heard that expression, but it sounds to me like you are definitely one that would fall into that category as well. So I don't know if you heard that expression or if you consider yourself to be a light warrior.
It sounds like an appropriate expression. And so we would appreciate all the contacts that you want to share, the connections, because certainly to continue to share, to express, to talk, to exchange information is a beautiful thing. So thank you, Mark.
No problem. Jacoby, you got any last minute questions? I know you popped in on the last second, but you always got masterful questions, and I'm always glad to have you enjoying us. And then, of course, we've got the Gamers Den, which is on Thursday. So if you ever want to see some really good conversation about the video game industry, don't forget that takes place on this platform at 1 o'clock on Thursday afternoons. We do that from 1 to 3, and we bring all kinds of folks in. One of the things that I know Jacoby loves doing is shattering stereotypes, because a lot of times folks are too caught up in the fact that they think of the negative aspects of video games and all of that. So he's always trying to encourage us to break those stereotypes that exist. So, Jacoby, you want to tell them about the Gamers Den? I just did, but you can tell them in your way and any other questions you got.
I mean, the Gamers Den is just it's about life. It's just breaking down barriers, breaking down the barriers between parents and kids, trying to teach kids that there are other opportunities instead of playing just video games. How teaching parents that it's a lifestyle that you can actually make a ton of money off of. I mean, there are kids that are making a killing, and everybody's grown up in our age playing video games, being around video games. So yeah, it's just a whole different look, and it's not talking about video games themselves. It's talking about how they relate to life, because it's a part of our life now. But other than that, yeah, I don't really have a great question. I think we just just tossing out a few here and there. Didn't want to try and monopolize the time or anything. But yeah.
No, I appreciate you. Definitely appreciate you coming in. Brent, did you play any video games when you were a kid and everything? And if so, what was your favorite video game? And I'm sure that Jacoby may even want you to come in on his show as well, because a lot of times the guests are not always just guests of the video community. Sometimes they're just general community folks. We've actually got Kara Oker, who's a friend of both of ours, that pops in and talks nutrition, but then she also talks video games. So I don't know, was there a video game that was your go-to game? And I'll ask Dolores the same thing.
Oh, goodness. I played way too many video games. I don't know if there's such a thing, but for a teenager anyway. Yeah.
So what was your go-to video game before I get to Dolores? So what was your go-to video game?
Wow. It seemed like it kept changing, because I was part of the generation that we got the Atari, the first video gaming system to come out, really. And then, that's replaced by Nintendo. And just every couple years, we got these new gaming systems, and it just kept getting better and better. And it was wonderful. I played a lot more of the fantasy type games, like the Dungeons and Dragons, Legend of Zelda. So that was more my thing.
Role playing games.
What about you?
Phenomenal section of games. Tons and tons of them.
What about you, Dolores? Are you still
so
involved in video games?
That was years ago, and my favorite game was Pac-Man. But that was so back in the day. All the stuff they have now, oh my goodness. I think the one thing I did like that I could see the kids using a lot of energy and exercise, and I think it was the Wii. Is it called the Wii?
Mm-hmm.
And it allows them to do activities as well as move and exercise as well. But for me back in the day, it was Pac-Man, for a while. But then, after that, I wasn't really interested in anymore. I like playing on my computer, and that's how I did my magazine, just by learning different stuff on the computer. And that's what my games were, trying to find out different ways to do different things. But I definitely loved Pac-Man back in the day.
Well, Divine Connection.
Are you trying Words with Friends on the phone and Candy Crush and all the other stuff?
No, actually, when I got my phone, I deleted those. I'm like, I'm not.
Oh, nice.
I see a lot of people just be playing, and I'm like, I like to listen to stuff. Even when I get in my car, I'm listening to some motivational CDs,
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. So playing games for me wasn't really a thing. So, when I was younger and a kid, yeah, but I'm like, I'd rather listen, watch YouTube. YouTube is my game, I can watch movies on there. I can watch shows on there. If I miss The Bold and the Beautiful, I can catch that up on YouTube. And so.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on all of that. Definitely agree that you catch up on all of that on a regular basis. I just had an idea. I'm always connecting people. I'm thinking that Divine Connections needs to sponsor a game event, since that's one of the things that Jacoby does, is he does all kinds of game things and all of that. So, Jacoby, when's your next game tournament? And are you always looking for, or are you available for sponsors? Because Dolores is always about connecting people.
I'm all about sponsors. Okay, so the thing is, I love getting things going. I love having people do positive things and, building stuff. But I suck as a businessman, and I suck asking for money. So I am always open for sponsors and everything else, but I suck at asking for sponsors because I feel bad about asking for money. It's my biggest downfall. But in terms of doing tournaments and stuff, I am in the midst of setting up tournaments all throughout March. I've got a setup for a tournament for Powerade that's going to be happening in June. I've got to get the cities of North Carolina involved. They're supposed to be jumping in and dropping in teams to represent every city in North Carolina to have, because the Parks and Rec have been, hit hard by the pandemic because nobody can go into the gyms and, be involved, and kids are left out. So I've got that happening. I've got some stuff working with the Durham Police Department, trying to get them involved with them connected with kids. I'm helping out the Urban Ministries this Thursday. Urban Ministries of Durham, it helps, helps with the homeless in Durham, with feeding, clothes, and all the other, and housing, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Phenomenal organization. I'm actually streaming their Empty Bowls event. That's going to be this Thursday, so everybody can tune in. It'll be on Bull City GG, as a matter of fact, on Twitch. So hopefully they'll get a lot of press and, people at least watching, because it is their biggest fundraiser of the year. And they usually have it in a location where tons of people buy tickets and come. But this year it has to be different. And, people get to try soups and vote on soups and donate money and help out the homeless, purchase some bowls. But great. It is a great thing. Or a great function, but it'll definitely be different this year because, again, it's all online and people can't go anywhere. So hopefully, again, they'll still have people watching and a number of people attending and helping out.
Awesome.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I actually, I'm head tech, and I work with adults with disability, and my client, I volunteer at Urban Ministries in Greensboro. We've been doing it for 13 years now. So they do the soup and everything and raise money. So I know exactly what you're talking about as far as Urban Ministries.
Yeah, Urban Ministries, they're a phenomenal organization.
Yeah,
they're a great organization.
Yeah, I've been helping them for about 10 years now with their Empty Bowls, helping them out with their MC and their function, and getting to meet the people, and great organization. Love them.
No doubt about that and everything. Dolores, I know we worked with Eric Kelly and the Black Business Olympics, the whole thing that we had going on this past week. But definitely tell Jacoby and tell Brent and those that are watching about your magazine once again and how they can get that magazine.
Sure. The magazine is called Divine Connection, and that's DIVINE Connections with an S. It comes out quarterly. I promote with different gospel artists, praise dance moms, pastors, entrepreneurs, authors, basically anything positive going on in the community. It comes quarterly in print as well as online. My website is divineconnectionsmagazine.com. If you want to get a copy of the recent one, which matter of fact, it's March, so it just came out for this issue, it's divineconnectionsmagazine.com/subscriptions. And of course, I do have a special for VIP if you want to stay connected all year round. Get the issues, the newsletters, be a part of the event and all of that good stuff for only $96 as well. So I just love connecting with new people. On Wednesdays, I do like interview where I just, for about 20 minutes, talk about who you are, what you do. You share it with the masses, leave contact information, and leave a word of encouragement. And so I do that live as well on Wednesdays. And then once a year, I do an event where I bring in gospel groups, praise dance, moms, vendors, and we have a nice networking worship event, and we just celebrate one another and give God glory.
Sounds great and everything.
What did you say?
That's it. That sounds great. I'm gonna let you talk about the Mother's Day event as well. I know Jacoby said he's got to get ready to bounce out. Him and Brent are having this whole conversation about dog camps because Brent can't believe that there's actually dog camps that exist.
Amazing.
All of that.
It is amazing. You guys don't realize how great dog camp is. It's a day camp for dogs, and you don't have to. And instead of them running around the house when it's wet outside and getting all muddy and everything else. And plus, when you have kids and you've got to make sure that the kids are focused on school instead of worrying about the kid, the dog and feed the dog. And it's a rambunctious dog too, so you just take them to day camp. It's like daycare for kids. So yeah, you just drop them off, stay there for a couple of
Sounds
hours,
great and
you're
everything.
good to go.
Definitely the day camp. What did you say, Brett?
Oh, it's amusing. I'm enjoying it. So
Yeah, definitely. You got to have those day camps for dogs, just like you have for your kids and everything. But Jacoby, I know you
makes
got to
sense.
get ready to bounce off, and I think we got one other person that's gonna just join us for a hot second and everything. But Jacoby, any words of encouragement or positivity that you want to share with my listening audience here on Mullins?
I one of the codes that I always live by: live like you are the ancillary character in the main story.
Yep, makes a lot of sense, and that's probably a good way to live life and everything. So I'm gonna let Jacoby bounce off and head off to get that dog of his and everything, and to make sure that the dog is doing well. So appreciate you and everything. Dolores, I think you were gonna share about the women's event that you've got coming on with Mother's Day. So I'd love to have that come on, and then we'll bring on really quickly because we only got a few more minutes to go. Well, he just walked away, but I'll bring him back later on and everything. But definitely share about the Mother's Day event that you've got going on. There we go. How are you doing? I understand you're a friend of Dolores's and everything. Glad that you were able to pop in. We're actually getting ready to wrap up this show, but definitely wanted to learn a little bit about you. We've been having a great conversation on religion and around
Yes,
a
sir.
number of other things. Brent has actually written a book about heaven and home and everything. So definitely glad to have you on and to share a little bit about what you got going on in your world.
Yes, sir. My name is William Harvey. I'm a media professional, but I have a background, mainly the majority of media I've done in my career has been ministry and I would say minority and ministry programming, from television to radio to graphics, media, all types of different things like that. And, just been doing a long time. I'm sorry coming in on the tail end of this. I don't know where y'all are, or what y'all are digging into, but you say, oh yeah, you want to get
We've
in
been
on
digging
this
into a little bit of everything. Brent has definitely given us some great conversation. He's written a fantastic book, and I know he's been trying to walk out the door himself, but I don't know how much money minutes he can give me and everything. But if you want to share a little bit more with our new guests about what the book is all about, and then one of the things I was going to ask you is, do you think the gentleman with WH Media, do you think that we're getting enough religious programming that's out there in general? Because I know there was a time that a lot of the cable programming was strictly religious, but I don't know if you think that there's enough of that out there in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, what's this book you were talking about?
Oh, well, Brent will tell you about his book.
Okay.
Oh,
So I wrote a book.
okay. I'm staying in
Yeah.
order. So. Okay.
That's fine. I wrote a book, Bringing Heaven Home. And it's about a series of experiences I had on the other side. So kind of like near-death experiences where a person crossover has his experiences with God. And so we've been talking about that for a little bit. And Dolores has been sharing some about her efforts and organization. And so I guess that's back to you on the question of, do we have enough religion and media?
I think from my experience and the things I've seen over the years, every generation has an expression of God that comes through the people that are called by his name. Now, this is just me personally. I don't speak for anybody else on this line. I don't know where y'all at on it. I'm just speaking from my own experience.
Right.
And from what I understand, it's one thing to grow up learning about it. I went to Catholic school, but I was raised Pentecostal. Go figure. I've traveled and I've seen a lot of different aspects from different people about, the connection with a God, and some people are wrestling with a higher being and what's his name and rah, rah, rah. That kind of deal. You got to have that real understanding for yourself in order to know exactly and recognize where he is in the world. And like the Bible says, the sheep know his voice. Well, if we are supposed to be the mouthpiece, or we're supposed to be the kingdom ambassadors, or we're supposed to be the people that are supposed to continue sharing and continue reaching out for him, go into the earth and spread, the message of the good news of the gospel, and be representatives, not just by mouth, but by example. Then there ought to be, every generation ought to have some type of expression. I mean, my media ministry started with a vision of Jesus or an apostle holding a tripod and a camcorder. That was the beginning of the vision that I had, because my question was, what would the apostles have done, publishing wise, media wise, if they had our tools?
Hmm.
How far would they go? Do you think they would have been reserved about it? I can only imagine what Peter would have done, because Peter was radical. Paul probably would have lost his mind. Like, oh y'all, oh my God, they'd have been sick of him. He had been on CNN, ESPN, everything. You know what I'm saying? Breaking all the rules. So my thing is, if there's no limit on a devil that can talk, why is there a limit on Jesus? Or why is there a limit on any angels? Why is there a limit on God? Why is there a limit on anything that God wants to say? And keep in mind, he don't need us, okay? He can speak for himself. But he chose us, and he said, no, I want you to do it. I want you to share in it. I want you to represent it. And I want you to do it and express it. And I want to enjoy watching you do it. So why aren't we doing it? Why aren't, all good and useful knowledge comes from God and comes from the Bible. It comes from anything we have. He spoke it first. So why are we second to use the technology? Why are we second to break the thresholds of what we can do and what we can share, and how far it can go? Does technology start or end with God? Yeah, he's the Alpha and the Omega. So why are we the last ones on the boat? You know what I'm saying? When the world takes it to extremes, man. And my thing is, if we're gonna be, and I'm gonna try to wind it up here, because I can get started. But if we're gonna be spiritually insecure, then we'll never get anywhere trying to do what we need to do for God. Because at the end of the day, he didn't ask us to be perfect. He didn't just call the qualified. He qualifies who he calls. So all we got to do is to show up, believe, and step. And the steps of a righteous man. He'll order it. He'll tell you every step, and you can step as fast as you want to. But the bottom line is, there's not enough of us moving and believing and standing up. And I'm not talking about politics, and I'm not talking about religion. I move past that. It's the bottom line. It's about relationship, and what are you willing to stand up for, and what are you willing not just to live for, but what are you willing to die for? And that's pretty much what you're going to say out of the abundance of your heart, what you believe, and that'll determine whether you're going to stand up or whether you're going to sit down. I think Grandma used to say, if you don't stand up for something, you fall for anything. So yeah. I'll stop there.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Brandon, I know you were actually trying to get out the door a minute ago, but he actually just raised another question, and I might wind up getting you here for another 5 or 10 minutes. But what do you say to folks that talk about their visions versus the near-death experience? Because what you did was you actually went up and everything, but visions are usually here on the planet Earth and everything. So how do you differentiate between those, or do you differentiate between those?
So every single one of us has some kind of an inner knowing. We all have that connection with God. And I think the difference between just feeling, having that inner knowing, having a vision, and then like being on the other side, having the full on experience, it's just one of joy. It's one of a feeling of confidence in self and that relationship with God. Because a lot of times we doubt ourselves when it's just that little feeling, that little nudging saying, hey, go do this or go do that. But when you're having that full-on experience, there's no doubt. The funny thing is, it's the same feeling that's still telling you do this and do that. It's just now coupled with this huge amount of joy and huge amount of love and bliss. And so I don't see a whole lot of difference between them other than the amount of joy that we're feeling having the experience. And the only thing that I would say is just to have some humility with the things that we're feeling, with the things that we're seeing, because a lot of times when we have the experience, we think it means one thing, and then later on, we have a different perspective. It means something else. And I do apologize. I do have to run,
No, I
but I have
appreciate you,
really
Brett.
loved this. So
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Yep. So that was pretty much we're getting ready to wrap everything up very shortly. I appreciate you being on, Dolores, and I definitely appreciate you popping on WH Media. Tell us a little bit about your media company. And I did want Dolores, before we wrap up, to tell about the Mother's Day event. But tell us a little bit about the media company and how folks can reach the media company, because I do believe one of the things we try to do is encourage entrepreneurs, activists, creatives, and educators, and definitely that's part of some of the work that you're doing. So how can folks reach you at WH Media, and tell folks about your company?
You can reach me at WH Media, WHMediaservices.com online. Probably the easiest way to find me on my website. And then on Facebook, you can just look up WH Media Services or WT Harvey. And, I'm not hard to find. Just look for the black logo and the process of excellence. That's my theme.
Sounds good. Excellence is something that we all need to be working on a regular basis, and I'm definitely a big fan of excellence as well. So definitely, I'm glad that you got that as your logo. Tell us a little bit about why you came up with that logo as what you go through and everything, because I think that sometimes we as a society don't even think about excellence the way that we should.
Well, the process of excellence is my way of reminding myself that we never arrive. As long as we're in this flesh, we are constantly, it's okay to pursue excellence, pursue perfection, but we won't be perfect until we see him and we are truly made in a better image, in the image of Christ. So my thing is, excellence is something that I learned. It's a lot like integrity. You're not born with it. You have to work at it. You have to choose it. You have to be willing to work toward it. And it's a learning experience from day one, and it'll probably be a learning experience till the day is over. So that's what brought me to that. And
Yep, definitely agree with you on that and everything.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm working toward that.
Appreciate it. Dolores, you want to share a little bit of appreciate that. Dolores, you want to share about the women's event? Because like I said, we've got maybe about another 10 minutes before I've got to wrap up and get ready to do my audio podcast. Because as I say, Mondays is my super podcasting day. I do 2 streaming ones and one that's the audio one. But definitely, if any words that you want to share about the women's event that you've got coming up in around Mother's Day and all of that.
Absolutely. So it's Divine Connections, and what we're doing is basically a campaign. And the campaign is going to consider of 2 different options. One would be for the mothers. If you have the best mom ever, and if your mom is your divine connections, we just want to give honor to her. And I will come up with a package that will give her recognition in the magazine, a certificate of recognition, and also a custom divine connection mask, and that's only $50. So it's just a small gift to give to your mom for Mother's Day. So we're going to be running this campaign from March 1st to March 30th. You can send me an email and let me know that you're interested in this is something you want to do for your mom at divineconnectionsmagazine@gmail.com. The second part is I'm looking for 100 sponsors. Those are business owners that have basically women gifts or Mother Day gifts. It can be pocketbooks or flowers. Of course, they'll take money too. Whatever you decide to give, and you will be listed in the Divine Connection directory. And also, we'll ask you to mail out one gift from your business to one of the mothers as well. And that way, we're honoring mothers. It's simple, but yet significant to let the mothers know that we appreciate them and we love them, and that they are our divine connections. So you can definitely contact again me at Divine Connections Magazine @gmail.com, or my number is 336-338-8903. And let me know if you want to have your mom to be have your mom to be a part, which you want to do the $50 packet, or if you want to be a sponsor, and that's only $25.
Appreciate
Well,
it.
my
Definitely
goal
some
is
great.
to have 100 each.
Yep, and I'm sure you get that 100 because you definitely are one of those people that is always out there doing positive things, and I have no doubt that you will accomplish that goal and everything. As I've done with the other two guests, I'd love to hear your words of encouragement or your words of positivity that you would like to share with our global audience. So I'll start with you, Dolores, and then come to WH. But definitely, I would love to hear your words of encouragement and your words of positivity.
Sure. I would say, first of all, love yourself. Second of all, love God. Make sure that you stay connected, as I always say at the end of my show, to the number one divine connector, which is Jesus Christ. You are important. You are gifted. You are talented. Don't let your activities or your skills go to the grave. While the God has given us this opportunity while we're here on this earth, for the time that we're here, make sure you maximize the opportunity and just be grateful, and let's just make it happen.
Sounds great. What about you, the gentleman from WH Media? Any words of encouragement or positivity that you would like to share with our global audience?
Um, I definitely would like to say that um, it's important to just continue to seek God and continue to grow and seek for more and not get complacent, not get stuck into any place that we're living in a time where ain't nobody comfortable. Everything is outside of the box. Everybody's no longer able to hide in their comfort zones. And it's a great place to be in terms of creating opportunity to learn more about yourself, more about your real faith, more about other people and what they're going through in their faith, and to learn that really touching and agreeing is not limited to four walls, that you can actually touch with somebody else and maybe even share something that helps somebody else. And it really gets us closer in the long run, as long as we don't get backed into a corner in a room afraid of everything. No, we got to keep living. And this is the God bringing us back to the basics. So I would encourage everybody, number one, learn how to pray. And nobody knows how to pray. You just basically open your mouth like I'm talking to you right now and say, God, are you there? Are you listening? I want to talk to you. And hopefully you'll stop for a moment and listen and give him a chance to say something in return. And I promise you, you keep bugging him, you get his attention, he's gonna show you who he is. But we gotta pray, we gotta meditate, we gotta keep talking to him, we gotta keep reaching and loving one another. And I think it's very important that we continue to seek and look to him, not just our leaders in the flesh, not just with politics. You look at YouTube, you look at TV, it could be depressing. If you keep watching news all day, it's like, oh my God, where are we going? But at the end of the day, those of us who know that there is a God, somebody got the last say, and it ain't the president. And it ain't nobody with money or power on this planet. And it's not the Satan or the Lucifer that controls the world system, because he's on the payroll too. I won't get into that. He got to ask for certain permission. So at the end of the day, just remember, God has the first and the last say. And if you can hold on to that, and if you can seek the master, then everything else, he'll navigate you through everything. He won't take your problems away. But I'll say, like folks say, Lord, don't move my mountain, but give me the strength to climb. Learn how to climb your mountains, and learn that by the time you get on top of that mountain, you won't have the weaknesses and the pain and the problems you had before. And your master is, which is up that hill where your power and your strength comes from. And like what my man said a little while ago before he got off the line, joy. There's a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness you can get from things that the world can provide, but joy comes from a place that the world can't give it to you, and the world cannot take it away from you, and it will be with you even when you're about to leave this world. I just walked my mama to the door this past year, and she was a person that was my example of what the difference is, where what he used to say, oh, that's above my pay grade. Yeah, we got a certain amount of strength, and then we have a line that separates where our power ends and his power begins. And it's at moments like that that I've learned that yes, you might be weak in your flesh, but your spirit becomes strong because you have a relationship with him. Like I said, I'm trying not to get started here, but I know for myself, you got to know for yourself. I would implore you, get to know them, spend more time with them, and learn for yourself. That's it.
Makes a lot of sense. Definitely glad to have y'all's words of wisdom and your words of positivity and words of great thought and all of that. Like I said, it's a global market, and definitely I know a lot of folks around the world are getting these very powerful messages, these very powerful thoughts that you have been sharing, Dolores. You have been sharing, the gentleman from WH Media, as well as what Brent Satterfield and Jacoby were sharing. So glad to have all four of y'all on Mullins Music and Memories. Didn't really get to that much of the music part this time, except for a little bit of conversation around that. But definitely, that's just the way that I let the conversations flow, depending on the way that they're supposed to go on that particular day. So this is the way that this conversation was supposed to go, and I think a lot of folks got a lot of great wisdom and great conversation. So always glad to have that happening here on the International Broadcast Media, and glad to have folks engaged in our conversation. So definitely always amazing seeing our amazing guests that share their wisdom, and we'll be back next week with more great guests as well, because we do 2 shows here on the International Broadcast Media on Mondays, and then we do our online dinner party on Wednesday afternoons between the same hours of 4 and 7, along with our mystery guests, where I find folks from the world of history and the world of society and all of that, and bring up a clues about them and all of that, and then so folks have to guess who those mystery guests are along with the real guests. So we'll have some real guests, and then we'll have the clues as to who the mystery guests will be scrolling across the bottom, because that's one of our little novel aspects of the online dinner party, which takes place between the hours of 4 and 7. So glad to have y'all both on the show and everything. And like I said, I had earlier a author that had talked about retiring at 52 on the radio show with Mark Lee. The other show that I do here on Monday afternoons as well. That one starts at 2:00. So was glad to have that particular person on, along with my good friend Tim Sohn, who comes in all the way from Pennsylvania. So there are some regular guests that sometimes appear, and then there are some of the guests that are just like here a few times. But always, I try to have my guests know that they are always welcome to come back and to share our platform here and all of that. So one of my good friends has a show that's on Friday nights called Mind Closet. So before I get off, I'm going to show a little bit of some of the other shows that air. And he's actually out of Nigeria, is a minister himself, and does a show around faith and all of that from Nigeria on Friday morning. So here's our spot about Mind Closet. And then we've got one more show that I was going to let folks know about. It's actually a show that I'll be producing tomorrow. We've actually moved the time. I think that if you'll watch this one, it says it was on either Monday or Wednesday, but it's actually on Tuesday. And it's a woman that recovered from cerebral palsy, but is still doing a lot of motivational things, called Win with Win. And it's Win Charles, who is a master motivational speaker. So I'm going to let folks check out about her show, which will start airing on this coming Tuesday, tomorrow at 7:00. And like I said, I'll see y'all on Wednesday between the hours of 4 and 7 for the online dinner party. And on that note, that's going to wrap up this particular edition of Mullen Music and Memories. And we look forward to seeing y'all back again on next Monday between the hours of 4 and 7. If you haven't had enough of my conversation and things of that nature, you can go on over to the audio space of blogtalkradio.com and check out our audio show, Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. So that'll be coming your way between the hours of 7 and 9. But right now, I'm getting ready to slide on out of here and get ready to slide on over to the phone so I can make that call in and have that conversation with my good friend, Dean Geronimo, and whichever guest we've got coming on over there.